Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and today I'll take you on a spooky story. But don't worry, it will be a gentle and relaxing journey before you drift off to sleep. If you're looking for a tale that's just mysterious enough and gentle enough to relax to, then you've come to the right place. Now, find yourself a comfortable space, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Story 1. The Monster in the Darkness. I still remember the first night the noises started. It was just after midnight, and I was lying on the narrow mattress in my dorm room, staring at the ceiling tiles that always looked like they were on the verge of collapsing. Everyone else had gone home for the holidays. The campus was a ghost town, quiet and dead, and that was exactly why I stayed. I needed peace to focus on my thesis, and I didn't want to go back to my parents' house. Too many memories there. There were 5 of us left in Hawthorne Hall. Me, Ezra, Trina, Mason, and Lee. We didn't know each other well, but we shared nods in the hallway and awkward silences in the common kitchen. Ezra was the only one I spoke to regularly. Tall, lanky guy with a sharp wit and an obsession with conspiracy theories. He was always talking about things that walk in silence and beings older than light. At first, the sounds were small, barely noticeable. A soft dragging sound down the hallway, like someone was moving furniture slowly across the floor. But no one was. Lee swore. Up and down, she hadn't moved anything in her room. Mason just rolled his eyes and said it was probably the building settling. That first night, I ignored it. Or tried to. I put in my earbuds and turned up some lo-fi to drown out the sound, but deep down, I already felt it. That tightening in the chest. That instinct that something was wrong. The second night, the sounds came again. Louder. This time it wasn't dragging. It was tapping. A rapid, erratic tap 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 on my door. I got up, pulled the door open without thinking. No one was there, but the hallway lights were flickering, casting long shadows that twisted as I moved. Something about the air felt off. Heavier, like it was vibrating. Like something had just been there. I looked down. Wet footprints, leading away from my door. Bare feet, no shoes, no socks. Just long, narrow prints smeared across the old tile. The next morning, I told Ezra. He didn't laugh like I thought he would. He leaned forward like he'd been waiting for me to say something. "You saw the footprints?" he asked. "Were the toes long?" I blinked. What? Like too long. More like claws than toes. I paused. I didn't count, but yeah, maybe. He nodded like that confirmed something. "It doesn't like being seen. That's why it knocks. It's testing you." "Testing me?" "To see if you'll open the door." I stared at him. "What the hell are you talking about?" But he didn't answer. He just looked past me, toward the hallway behind my shoulder. By the 4th night, the noises were inside the walls. Scratching. No, not just scratching. Scraping, like something with nails, trying to find a way through. The sound traveled, sometimes above my head, sometimes right behind the bed's headboard. Mason started losing sleep. He knocked on my door around 2 a.m., with dark circles under his eyes and his voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," he muttered. "Do you hear it too?" I didn't even have to ask what he meant. Trina came the next night. She'd locked herself in her bathroom because she swore she saw someone standing in the corner of her room. Someone tall and gaunt, with skin so dark it absorbed the light. But when she turned on the light, it was gone. We all gathered in the common room the next morning. The atmosphere had shifted. Gone were the awkward nods. We were clinging to each other now, tied together by something we didn't understand. "I want to leave," Lee said. She was shaking. "I keep dreaming that I'm walking down the hall, and I hear my mom calling me from the basement. But my mom's dead. She died when I was 7. Ezra just stared at her. "Don't follow the voice. That's how it gets in," Trina snapped. "What the hell does that mean, Ezra? What is this?" Ezra hesitated. His eyes darted to the darkened window. "I don't know exactly, but I've read stories. Old ones. Some creatures don't live in the woods or the mountains. Some of them live in buildings. Old ones, forgotten ones, and they feed on fear." "You think this is some kind of monster?" I asked. "I think we're already in its nest," he whispered. Later that night, I stayed up with Trina in the common room. We left all the lights on. Lee and Mason joined us too. None of us wanted to be alone anymore. Sometime around 3 a.m., the power went out. Not a flicker, not a slow dim. Just black, total darkness. We froze. The emergency lights didn't come on. Even our phones, which had full battery earlier, refused to turn on. And then we heard it. Breathing. Not us. Heavy, wet, right behind us. Trina gasped. I heard Lee sob. I couldn't even scream. I was too scared to move. The breathing grew louder, circling the room like it was choosing. Then came the scratching. From inside the couch. We bolted. I don't remember how we got out of the room. Maybe someone had a lighter or a flashlight. I just remember the hallway was darker than it should have been. Like the shadows were thicker there. They moved. They watched. Mason ran toward the stairwell. I followed. But halfway down the hall, I saw it. Just for a second, something crouched in the corner. Thin, pale, with joints that bent the wrong way. Its head was tilted sideways like it didn't understand what we were. Its eyes glowed, but not with light. With hunger. We locked ourselves in Lee's room, pushed the dresser against the door. We stayed there until morning. When the sun came up, the power came back. Phones turned on like nothing had happened. No one believed us. Campus security said we were hallucinating. Stress from staying over the holidays. Lack of sleep. Group delusion. But we know, and we're not leaving. Not yet. Because Ezra thinks we might be able to trap it, or kill it, whatever it is. But if we fail, I don't think the next group of students will be so lucky. I didn't sleep the next day. None of us did. We sat in Lee's room with the curtains drawn and the lights turned on. Every single one. Even the tiny desk lamp in the corner was glowing like a desperate ward against the darkness. Outside, the sky was gray and unmoving, clouds hanging low like the sky itself was about to collapse. It was Ezra who finally broke the silence. "I think it's marking us." Trina glanced up, her face pale, the skin beneath her eyes an unhealthy blue. "Marking?" He nodded slowly. "The dreams, the knocking, the way our phones shut off last night. None of this is random. It's watching us, studying how we respond to fear, choosing who to isolate." "No." Mason stood abruptly. "No, I'm not doing this. I didn't stay behind for some ghost hunt. I stayed to finish a goddamn final paper, not play survival games with some imaginary cryptid." But there was nothing imaginary about what we saw, or what we felt. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I heard Lee whisper, "He won't last the night." Later that afternoon, I went back to my dorm. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to feel normal again. Maybe I thought if I could just sit at my desk and type a few sentences for my thesis, everything would fall back into place. But the second I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. The air was different, too cold, too still. My desk chair was turned toward the window, though I'd left it tucked in. My blanket had fallen to the floor, as if something had crawled out from underneath it. I backed out of the room and shut the door without entering. When I turned around, I saw a smear of something dark and sticky across the hallway wall. It wasn't blood, not exactly. It was too black, too oily, and it smelled like mildew and rot and something ancient. I ran back to Lee's. We found Mason that night. Or rather, we heard him first. It started with screaming. Not from down the hall, but through the vents. Muffled, guttural, desperate. We ran out into the corridor, and the lights flickered again. Once, twice, then total darkness. Trina had a flashlight. We used it to guide us toward Mason's room. The air felt thick, like walking through molasses. Every step came with a growing sense of dread, like we were moving straight into something's open mouth. When we got there, the door was ajar. Inside, the room was trashed. Furniture overturned, the mattress half off the bed frame. Scratches, deep, jagged gouges, covered the floor and walls. Some were high up, too high for any person to reach without a ladder. And in the middle of the chaos was Mason, curled up in a corner, shaking violently. He was alive, but barely. His skin was covered in long, parallel scratches, too deep to be fingernails. They looked like they'd been carved into him with bone or stone. His eyes were wide, unfocused. He was muttering something over and over. We leaned closer to listen. It's under the floor. It lives in the wood. We carried him back to Lee's room, and for the rest of the night, we took shifts watching him. Ezra refused to leave his side. He's been touched, he whispered. It made contact. It's inside him now. What the hell are you talking about? I asked. Ezra looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. Fear. You've read about parasites, right? Ones that control their hosts. Make them do things. There are fungi that take over ants. Worms that drive crickets into water to drown. That thing, whatever it is, it doesn't kill right away. It consumes. I shook my head. You're losing it. Am I? He asked quietly. Then why does Mason keep whispering that it's under the floor? That it's in the wood? We were quiet after that, but I couldn't shake the thought. All these old buildings, this whole dorm, it's built with untreated pine. Hollow spaces between floorboards, creaky stairs, cracks in the drywall that lead to nowhere. It could be inside. It could be watching. Around 4 a.m., I dozed off. I don't know how long I slept, but I remember the dream. I was back in my room. Only the walls were breathing in and out, expanding like lungs. And in the center of the room was a hole, black, pulsing. Something was crawling out of it. Something long, gaunt, with fingers like splinters and a face made of stitched skin. It didn't have eyes, but it saw me. And then it smiled. I woke up screaming. But the worst part wasn't the dream. It was the noise I woke to. Scraping from inside the dresser. Ezra yanked the flashlight toward it. The beam shook in his hands. We didn't move for several seconds. Then something inside knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. I swear to God, I heard it whisper, "Let me in." We didn't sleep the rest of that night. In the morning, Mason was gone. We never heard the door open, Never heard footsteps. Just gone. His scratches remained on the sheets and on the walls. Someone or something had written a single sentence in that same oily black sludge. He opened the wrong door. We called the campus security again. They came, looked around, took notes, said Mason probably just left for the holidays without telling anyone. We knew better, but none of us argued, because something tells me it wanted us to report it. It wanted us to start poking around. Ezra was convinced we had limited time. I think it needs us afraid, he said. The more scared we get, the more it manifests. It's feeding off us. I stared at the floorboards. Then what happens when it's full? He didn't answer, but I already knew. We searched for Mason until the sun was high in the sky, but there was no trace of him. No packed bags, no phone, no exit logs from the security desk downstairs. Nothing. It was like the building swallowed him whole. Ezra stayed quiet for most of the day. Not like before, where he would at least mutter some theory or cryptic warning. This time, he was distant, haunted. His eyes wouldn't meet mine, and when I asked what he was thinking, he just muttered, "We waited too long." Lee took it the hardest. She kept saying it wasn't real, that Mason must have had a mental break, ran off in the night. She tried to convince herself it was all some shared psychosis, that stress and isolation were playing tricks on us. But then she found her door scratched. Long, uneven gouges across the bottom, low to the ground, like something crawled in. She didn't say anything after that. Later that evening, we gathered in the lounge just down the hall from Ezra's room. It was one of those forgotten spaces in the dorm, with faded wallpaper and a TV from the early 2000s mounted crooked on the wall. Nobody ever used it. That's probably why Ezra chose it. He spread out a stack of old floor plans across the dusty coffee table. I had no idea where he'd even gotten them. This building was constructed in 1928, he said, pointing to the corner of one of the pages. It was originally a tuberculosis ward, then a youth asylum in the 50s. Became part of the university sometime in the 70s. Trina leaned over his shoulder, eyes scanning the yellowed paper. So what? Old buildings are creepy. That doesn't explain this. Ezra didn't look up. It's not just old. Look here. He tapped a thin section between the second and third floors. There's an entire sublevel, not a basement, a sealed crawl space between floors, about 4 feet high, runs the full length of the building. My mouth went dry. That's where it's been hiding. Ezra nodded. And traveling, watching. A thick silence fell over the room. Trina was the first to speak. We need to leave. Now. Pack our shit and get out. I don't care if it means failing finals or walking through a snowstorm. I'm not dying here. But Ezra didn't move. He stared at the floor plans like they were scripture. I don't think it lets you leave, he finally whispered. Not after you've seen it. That night we slept in shifts again. Lee and I took the first watch while Ezra and Trina tried to rest. We barricaded the door with a chair and left the lights on, though we both knew it didn't matter. The creature, whatever it was, could come through the floor, through the vents, through our minds. I tried not to think about Mason, but I kept seeing his face, the blank stare, the marks on his skin, the way he whispered about the wood, like it was alive. Around 2:45 a.m., Lee nodded off, and that's when I heard it again. That same tapping, but this time, it wasn't at the door. It was coming from the walls, from inside them. Tap, tap, drag, tap. The pattern was deliberate, too steady to be rodents or pipes. It moved behind the drywall, circling us like a predator, measuring its prey. I held my breath, tried not to move. Then, a whisper, low, drawn out, right beside my ear. Do you remember the first time you were afraid? I froze. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years. My father's. He'd been dead since my senior year of high school. Cancer. The kind that strips a person down to bones and pain, but that whisper. It was him. The gravel in his throat, the way he said afraid like a challenge, not a question. I turned. Nothing there. Just shadows dancing on the far wall. I didn't wake Lee. I couldn't. I just sat there, wide-eyed, hands trembling, until the others stirred at dawn. The next morning, Trina was gone. Just like Mason. No signs of struggle, no blood. Her boots were still by the door, her coat still hanging. But her phone? Gone. And carved into the wood of the door frame, deep and jagged, was one sentence. She followed the voice. Lee screamed. Ezra punched the wall hard enough to split the skin on his knuckles. I couldn't move, because suddenly I realized something horrifying. Trina had told us earlier that night, casually in passing, that her older brother used to read to her during storms. How his voice always calmed her, even after he died in a motorcycle crash 5 years ago. She'd heard him, just like I'd heard my father. That thing, it uses the dead. It wears them like masks. Reaches into your memory, finds the warmest voice, and twists it. We weren't just being hunted. We were being conditioned. By the 4th day, there were only 3 of us left. We didn't speak much. We ate cold food out of cans. We didn't go near the vents or the dark corners of the hallway. We taped our ears at night with bits of tissue and duct tape. Anything to muffle the voices. But that night, that damn night, Ezra broke. He stood up in the middle of our so-called safe room, eyes wild, mouth twitching. He looked at me and Lee like he didn't recognize us. I saw it, he said, in the mirror, behind me, just for a second. I saw its true face. Lee backed away, her hands trembling. Ezra, sit down. But he didn't. He grabbed a lighter from his coat pocket, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a journal. His own. The one he'd been writing in since the second night. Too much ink in this place, he muttered. Too many stories. It feeds on stories, on memory. If we forget it, maybe it'll starve. Then he lit the pages on fire. The journal went up fast. The flame spread to his sleeve. We shouted, tackled him to the floor, tried to smother it, but not before a patch of carpet caught. Smoke filled the room. The alarm never went off. Lee grabbed a towel and started waving it under the door. I got the fire out. Ezra curled in the corner, burned, whispering to himself over and over. It has no name. That's why it hides. We're running out of time. I can feel it. The thing is closing in, taking pieces of us one at a time. Not just our bodies, our minds, our pasts. It's scraping out the pieces that make us us. If you're reading this, if you ever step foot in Hawthorne Hall, don't listen. Don't remember. Don't open the wrong door. Story 2. The Flight with No Destination. I've always had a strange relationship with flying. It's not exactly a fear, at least not in the conventional sense. I don't panic when the wheels lift off the ground, and I don't get the urge to clutch the armrests when turbulence hits. But there's something about the in-between of it all. Being suspended above the earth, trapped in a metal tube with 100 strangers. that makes me feel observed, watched, like something unseen slips on board in the confusion of boarding and waits for everyone to forget it's there. Maybe that's why I didn't think much of the atmosphere at gate C-17 when I arrived for my red-eye to Portland. It was just past 11:00 p.m. The airport was half asleep, drenched in that humming fluorescent quiet that only comes after the last rush of the day dies down. There were maybe 24 people in the gate area. A family with 3 restless kids sprawled across a row of chairs. A businessman arguing on his phone near the windows. An older woman knitting something blood red. And a group of teenage boys hunched over their phones, laughing too loudly. Nothing unusual, except for the quiet man in the corner. He was dressed in a grey suit, the kind you'd wear to a funeral. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on his lap, looking straight ahead, not at the departure screens, not at his phone, not at anything. Just ahead. I couldn't see his face clearly because of the angle, but something about his posture was off, like he wasn't waiting for a flight, like he didn't belong in that space at all. Still, I brushed it off. I had bigger things on my mind. A week earlier, my younger sister had been in a car accident. She'd survived, but barely. And she'd asked me to come see her in Portland. Said she had something important to tell me. Something she didn't want to say over the phone. The plane started boarding at 11:30 p.m. I was in Group B, so I waited while they called pre-boarding and then Group A. When I stood up, I noticed the man in the grey suit was gone. I hadn't seen him move, hadn't heard him stand or walk away. One moment he was there, the next, nothing. Again, I told myself to stop being dramatic. I had a tendency to spiral when I was overtired. By the time I stepped onto the plane, I'd convinced myself it was just another late-night flight. But it wasn't. The interior was colder than expected. Not just cool from the air vents, cold, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. I glanced up at the flight attendant by the door. She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a strange tightness in her expression, like she was holding something back. Her name tag said Karen, all capital letters. Her lipstick was smudged. "Welcome aboard," she said, voice flat. "Hope you enjoy the flight." I nodded and moved down the aisle. My seat was 22A by the window. I stowed my bag, settled in, and looked around. Something felt off about the other passengers. Not all of them. Just a few scattered throughout the plane. The woman in 14D, who kept turning her head toward the window, whispering to it. The old man in 19F, who was staring directly ahead without blinking. And a child in 11A, sitting alone. No parents in sight. That last one made my skin crawl. I asked the man beside me, a heavy-set guy in a Seahawks hoodie, if he saw the kid sitting alone. He blinked slowly, as if it took him a second to understand the question. Then said, "What kid?" 11A, I pointed. "There's a little boy sitting there, alone." The man leaned over slightly to get a better look, then furrowed his brow. "That seat's empty, dude." I didn't say anything after that. Just turned back to my window and tried not to think too hard about what I'd seen. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe my nerves were getting the best of me. Maybe I hadn't slept enough. But then the lights flickered. Only for a second, but enough to draw a few murmurs. The intercom crackled, and the captain's voice came through, unusually low. Good evening, folks. This is your captain. We'll be departing shortly. Weather's looking clear. Should be a smooth ride up to Portland. Flight time, roughly an hour and a half. Thanks for flying with us. The lights dimmed to that ambient glow they use for takeoff. The engines whirred, the cabin trembled, and as we rose into the night sky, I felt it again. That weight. Like we weren't the only ones on board. About 20 minutes in, I got up to use the bathroom. The aisle felt narrower than I remembered. The lights overhead burst, flickering just enough to be disorienting. As I passed row 11, I glanced at the seat again. The child was back. This time, I saw him more clearly. His skin was pale gray, his hair damp and clinging to his forehead like he'd just been pulled from water. He turned toward me, slowly, and smiled. I froze. My mouth went dry. Then I blinked, and the seat was empty again. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and gripped the sink, trying to slow my breathing. I could feel my heart thudding behind my eyes. I hadn't imagined that. I couldn't have. When I opened the door to return to my seat, the lights in the cabin were completely out. The kind of blackout that doesn't happen on commercial flights. The emergency lights weren't on. The hum of the engines was quieter, like we were gliding instead of flying. No one was speaking. Not a single passenger moved. And in that silence, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming toward me from the cockpit. But when I looked ahead, the aisle was empty, completely empty, until I saw it. A figure standing by the flight deck door, dressed in a gray suit, hands folded. The man from the terminal. He turned his head, and though I still couldn't see his eyes, I felt them land on me. Felt them inside me, like they were measuring something. Then the intercom crackled again. A voice, not the captain's, came through. We welcomed the new souls aboard. The cabin lights flared back on all at once. Passengers stirred, blinking in confusion. Some muttered curses. Others rubbed their eyes. But no one said anything about the voice. No one said anything about the man by the cockpit door. Because he was gone. When I got back to my seat, the man next to me was asleep or unconscious. I wasn't sure which. I stared out the window and saw something that made my stomach twist. Another plane, flying alongside us. No lights, no markings. Just a dark shape, moving in perfect parallel. And in its windows, I saw faces, dozens of them, pale, blank, and watching. I turned away and shut my eyes. I didn't want to see anymore, but I had a growing feeling that we were no longer flying toward Portland. We were flying somewhere else. I don't know how long I kept my eyes closed. Long enough that my mind started to betray me. Long enough that my sense of time came undone. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. But when I finally looked again, the other plane was gone. Not a trace of it against the night sky. Just blackness. The engines had changed sound again. It was subtle at first. Less of a mechanical whir and more of a groan, a low, dragging noise, like the plane was pulling something through the clouds. I opened the window shade farther and looked down. There was nothing. No city lights, no stars. Not even the red blinking wing light was reflecting on anything. Just void. I leaned closer to the glass, and that's when I noticed something else. Condensation. Not just a little fog. Something was breathing on the outside of the window. Something was fogging the glass from the wrong side. I jerked back. My seatmate still hadn't moved. His head lolled slightly to the side, mouth open, but his chest wasn't rising. I leaned in close. No breath, no twitch, no warmth. I whispered, "Sir?" and touched his wrist. It was ice cold, Before I could think to stand, the overhead lights dimmed again, then pulsed. Not flickered, pulsed in rhythmic intervals, like the cabin itself had a heartbeat. That same message played again, low and scratchy through the intercom. We welcome the new souls aboard. This time, I wasn't the only one who heard it. A woman 2 rows up started crying softly. Another man pressed the flight attendant call button over and over, but no one came. No one ever came. I unbuckled my belt, stood, and walked toward the back of the plane. The flight attendants' area was empty. The curtain that usually separated their galley from the bathroom was drawn open, revealing metal cabinets, but the snacks were gone. No water bottles, no coffee pot. The walls looked wrong. They were covered in something like soot or mold, spreading in handprint-shaped patches. I pushed farther toward the back bathroom door, knocked gently, then opened it. Empty, but there was something written on the mirror, not scratched in with a finger, not fog writing, but etched into the glass, thin and deliberate like it had been carved with a needle. They trade 1 for 1. I didn't know what that meant at the time. Not really, but I felt it in my spine. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the floor. My shoes had left prints, wet prints, and I hadn't walked through any water. When I turned to go back to my seat, the cabin lights cut out completely again. Darkness swallowed the entire interior. And then the screaming started. It wasn't all at once. It was a single shriek, male, deep, ragged, and then a flurry of movement near the front of the plane. Footsteps thundered toward the back. A man sprinted down the aisle, panting hard, eyes wide. "They took her," he gasped. "They took her." I grabbed his shoulders. Who? Who did? He pointed back toward row 6, trembling. She was there, my wife. Then the lights went out and she was gone. Gone. But something was there instead. Something with a face like it wore her skin wrong. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to go forward. But something inside me said, "If you sit here, you'll be next." So I moved with him, carefully, quietly. A few other passengers began to stir from their seats, blinking, as if waking from a dream, their confusion thick on their faces. When we reached row 6, the seat was indeed empty, but there was something left behind. A red scarf knotted around the headrest. The same scarf the woman had been wearing when we boarded. And the seatbelt still buckled, still holding the impression of someone seated, but no one there. A low groaning noise filled the cabin again. This time, not from the engines. It was underneath us. The man beside me. His name was Jeremy, I learned. Dropped into the aisle and pressed his ear to the floor. I told him he was crazy. "I hear them," he whispered. "They're underneath us, crawling." The plane shuddered. Lights flared again, but now they were tinted green, like emergency lighting on a sinking submarine. And then I saw her, the flight attendant, Karen. She stood at the far end of the cabin, just before the cockpit. Her uniform was soaked with something thick and black. Her smile was too wide now. Her cheeks stretching past the corners of her jaw, lips cracked and bleeding. "We are approaching our destination," she said, her voice calm, hollow. The cockpit door swung open. There was no pilot. There was no co-pilot. Just a wall of fog, thick and rolling like it came from another world. I stepped forward, almost against my will, as Karen turned and disappeared into it. I swear I heard whispers coming from inside, voices layered over each other like a broken recording. More souls. More. We trade one for one. Suddenly I remembered the child in row 11. I ran. Row 11 was empty again, but something was wrong with the seat. The fabric had changed. It wasn't commercial-grade upholstery anymore. It looked older, faded velvet. The metal frame was rusted, and something had clawed long grooves down the armrests. And the window? There was no window, just a wall of darkness that pulsed like it was alive. That's when I realized something horrifying. We weren't in the air anymore. We weren't anywhere anymore. I grabbed Jeremy. We have to get out of this plane. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Where do you think the exits go now? And that's when I saw them. The passengers who hadn't moved earlier, the ones who looked strange, stiff. They were standing now, one by one, turning toward us. Their faces shifting, mouths opening too wide, eyes bleeding into black. They weren't passengers. They were waiting to trade. I turned and ran for the emergency door. I don't know what I thought I'd do. Rip it open mid-flight, jump into the void? But when I reached it, there was something written in blood on the handle. You can leave, but someone else must stay. I backed away, because now I understood. This flight wasn't delayed. It wasn't rerouted. It was damned. And it only ever had one rule. They trade one for one. I stood frozen at the emergency door, my hand trembling, just inches from the blood-stained handle. The words, "You can leave, but someone else must stay," pulsed in my head like a drumbeat, steady and cruel. I couldn't tear my eyes from them. I wanted to scream, to force the door open anyway, and leap into whatever lay outside. But something deeper, something ancient and instinctive, kept me still. The plane wasn't flying anymore, and yet it hadn't landed. It felt like we were drifting, suspended, held in place not by gravity or thrust, but by something far older. Something watching. Behind me, Jeremy was muttering to himself. "We can't all go," he whispered. "It doesn't let us all go." I turned around. His eyes were wide, the pupils pinpricks. His lips moved soundlessly for a moment, and then he said something I'll never forget. "I think this is a ferryman, not a plane, a ferry of the dead." I wanted to laugh at how ridiculous it sounded, but the thing was, he was right. The more I looked around, the more everything started to change. Subtly, horribly, the seats no longer looked uniform. The safety placards were peeling. Overhead bins hung at wrong angles, rust bleeding through their edges. Oxygen masks dangled in limp, deflated curls from the ceiling like shriveled vines. The cabin reeked of metal, salt water, and something else, something sour and old, like mildew and rot. And then the whispers returned. They came in waves, seeping from the walls and floor. Dozens of voices murmuring in tones just below comprehension. Some laughed, some begged. Some just said one word over and over. "Stay, stay, stay." Jeremy clutched his head and dropped to the floor, rocking back and forth. "They're choosing," he said. "They're choosing who pays." I backed away from the door and pulled him to his feet. "Come on. We need to find help. Or something. A way out." He looked up at me with hollow eyes. "There is no help. You saw the sign. We either trade or we join them." I didn't want to believe it, but the weight of the truth was everywhere. The plane had become a threshold, and not everyone was real. Not anymore. We moved slowly through the aisle. The other passengers, the ones who still looked alive, seemed to be waking from a trance. Some blinked in confusion. Others whispered prayers under their breath. A woman near the back held her phone up, trying to get a signal, her thumb trembling as she stared at the screen. There was no signal, no GPS, no time. Her phone screen glitched, and I caught a glimpse of something impossible. Not her reflection, not even the cabin, but an ocean, vast and black, stretching out in every direction, with thousands of pale faces just beneath the surface. Watching, waiting, she dropped the phone. It shattered on the ground. Then she screamed, loud and sudden, and bolted up the aisle. Before I could call after her, the lights flickered again, and she was gone. Not just out of view. Gone. The sound of her running, her footsteps, the echo of her voice, all vanished. Like she'd been erased from the moment she stood up. Jeremy clutched my sleeve, his fingers digging in. That's what happens when the trade isn't made. Panic clawed at my throat. How do they choose? I asked. Is it random? Are they picking us one by one? He shook his head. No, it's always a choice. Someone has to make it. I felt sick. The idea that survival came down to betrayal. It made me want to crawl out of my skin. We passed row 11 again. The child was there now, fully visible. His head turned slowly as we passed. His eyes were blank. Lips parted, whispering something too low to hear. Then, almost in a blink, he wasn't a child anymore. The seat was now filled by a woman in a wedding dress, her veil soaked with blood. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. One for one, one for one, one for one. I stumbled back. Jeremy nearly tripped over a body. Yes, a body that hadn't been there moments before. A man in a pilot's uniform, chest torn open, ribs cracked wide like a broken cage. It was the actual pilot. Who's flying this thing? I muttered. Jeremy looked up, his face pale as ash. No one. We pressed on, fighting through the overwhelming sense of dread. We passed a row where a woman was clutching a baby. She rocked back and forth, sobbing, as the infant let out low gurgling sounds. Not cries, growls. She didn't seem to notice the way its head was twisted the wrong way, or how its eyes were pitch black sockets. I had to look away. It was all wrong. Every part of this place felt engineered to unravel sanity, to wear us down until one of us broke and made the choice. We made it to the front of the cabin. The fog still pulsed beyond the cockpit door. But there was something else now. A glowing doorway forming in the mist. I could see shadows moving behind it, silhouettes of people, waving, calling, trying to be heard. Come through, they whispered. Please, let us go back. I didn't recognize any of the voices, but Jeremy froze beside me, eyes wide. Assistant Jenny, he said, barely audible. He stumbled toward the cockpit, toward the fog. I grabbed him. Don't. That's my wife. She died 2 years ago. I buried her. She's in there. She's waiting for me. You don't know that's her, I said. You know what this place is. They're using her. He hesitated, and then the fog cleared for just a second. And standing there, on the other side, was a woman with curly black hair and a blue summer dress. She smiled at him. Tears ran down her cheeks. Jeremy whispered, Jenny, and stepped into the cockpit. I didn't stop him this time, but he never made it through the door. As soon as he entered the threshold, the fog wrapped around him like tendrils. His body jerked back, spine snapping with a sickening crack. He didn't scream, just convulsed, and then vanished. The doorway slammed shut, and the whispers returned. Still one short. I stood there numb, breathless, alone, until I heard movement behind me. Karen, the flight attendant, was back, but her skin was peeling now, revealing raw muscle and empty sockets underneath. She tilted her head at me, blood seeping from her mouth as she whispered, "It's your turn." And in her outstretched hand was a passenger manifest with one name highlighted. Mine? I stared at the manifest in her rotting hands. My name, Lucas Grayson, was circled in red, not ink, blood. Fresh and wet, the crimson beads slowly trickled down the page, forming a small spreading blot where my name had been marked. I couldn't move. Karen, or whatever was wearing her body, just stood there, smiling. Her teeth were black, rotted. Her jaw too wide now, unhinged in a grotesque parody of hospitality. She held the manifest out like it was a gift. "You're next," she whispered. Her voice a death rattle under thinly veiled cheer. The cabin was deathly silent. Behind me, the cockpit door had sealed again, fog pulsing faintly through its seams like breath. The temperature was dropping. I could see my breath now, faint clouds escaping my lips. I took a step back. She followed. "It only ends when the trade is made." Her voice echoed in my head now, not just my ears. It vibrated in my bones. I turned and bolted. I didn't know where I was running to. Maybe I thought if I could just reach the emergency hatch again, or the exit rows, I'd find something, anything. But the moment I passed row 7, the cabin changed again. The rows shifted. Literally. The geometry bent. What had been a standard aisle now twisted to the left, like an optical illusion made real. I stopped short, my vision swimming, and turned around, but the way behind me had also changed. I wasn't in the same plane anymore. The seats were mismatched now. Velvet, leather, plastic. Some rows looked antique, others brand new. One row had no seats at all, just empty restraints fastened to the wall with deep scratches carved beneath them. Scratches that looked like someone had tried to climb out. I backed up and found myself facing a window. What I saw outside was not the sky. It was a hallway of doors. Each door looked different, some modern, some ancient, one even made of stone. But every single one was closed, and beyond them, behind the glass, shadows paced. Some reached out toward me with fingers that never quite touched. One stared without eyes. Then, one of the doors opened, not all the way, just a crack. And from inside, something crawled into view. I stumbled back. It looked human at first glance, but its limbs were too long, bent the wrong way. Its skin shimmered like wet wax, and it dragged something behind it. Something that looked like a person. A passenger, limp, eyes open wide in silent scream, mouth gagged with shadow. The creature saw me. I know it did. It started crawling faster. I ran. I cut through the warped aisle, ducked into the galley at the rear of the plane, and slammed the sliding door shut. The space was tight, claustrophobic. Just a few feet of metal counter, storage compartments, and the faint smell of rot hidden beneath lemon disinfectant. I pressed my back to the wall, panting. Then the screen flickered. A small monitor mounted in the corner. A relic of an older airline model crackled to life. Static burst. And then, like a corrupted tape, it began to play. Security footage of me. It was the gate footage. I was sitting near the window at gate C-17 just before boarding. I looked tired, distracted, normal. But the footage was wrong. In the background behind me, people moved too quickly, their faces blurred, then sharpened in horrifying detail. The man in the funeral grey suit stood completely still the whole time, unmoving, unblinking, until, at the last second before I stood to board, he turned his head toward the camera and grinned. The feed cut out, my legs gave out, and I slid to the floor. I couldn't breathe. My mind was unraveling, trying to make sense of it. There was no logic to this place, no physics, no pattern, except one for one. The trade, Karen's voice returned, even though she wasn't there. It must be chosen. My brain latched onto that word. Chosen. That meant it wasn't automatic. It meant it could be delayed, bargained, even denied. Unless someone else made the choice for you. I scrambled to my feet and threw open the galley door. The cabin was silent again. As I stepped out, I realized the lighting had changed. Everything was tinted a deep, rusted orange now. As if the walls were bleeding light, there was a faint, rhythmic thudding, like a heartbeat echoing through the plane's hull. Rows of passengers sat in eerie stillness, but now I could see which were real and which were not. The not real ones were easy to spot now. Their clothes were dated. Some blinked out of sync with the lights. One had no mouth at all, just skin stretched where lips should have been. I spotted a man about 5 rows up, middle-aged, wearing a button-down and khakis, breathing fast, looking around. He was real. I sat beside him. He jumped startled. "Hey," I whispered. "You see what's happening, right?" He looked at me with wild, bloodshot eyes. "I saw them take the woman in 24B. She didn't scream. She just stopped being there. I can't..." "What's your name?" "Donovan." "Listen to me, Donovan. There's a pattern here. A rule. Every time someone disappears, someone else stays. They're trading places. And I think..." I hesitated. I couldn't say it. Couldn't say what I was thinking. But Donovan said it for me. "You're thinking we have to give someone up, aren't you?" I looked away. "I'm not saying we do, but I think someone always does, whether they mean to or not." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if we gave them one of theirs?" I looked back at him. His jaw was tight, his hands trembling. "I mean, they're not real, right? The ones that don't move. The ones with those eyes. What if we could trick the plane into taking one of them?" The idea chilled me. But it was the only idea we had. We moved slowly, cautiously, scanning rows, looking for one of them. And then I saw her again. Row 14D. The woman who kept whispering to the window. Her fingers bled from rubbing the same patch of glass again and again. Donovan took a deep breath. "Let's do it." He leaned over and touched her shoulder. She turned and smiled. But it wasn't a human smile. Her mouth split from cheek to cheek, revealing rows of narrow teeth like a lamprey. Her skin peeled away as she lunged forward. Donovan screamed. She grabbed him. I reached for him, but it was too late. She dragged him backward into the wall, which rippled like liquid, swallowing him whole. Gone. Just like that. Then silence. And then the plane began to shift again. The lights dimmed. The cabin brightened. The fog at the cockpit door vanished, and a voice, not Karen's this time, but something older, deeper, spoke over the intercom. Balance restored. I collapsed into the seat. Donovan had made the choice in the end, and it had cost him everything. But I was still here. For now. Story 3. I was the last one to transport that thing. I wasn't always this paranoid. Didn't always jump at the sound of a knock. Didn't used to sleep with a knife under my pillow. But things change when you become property. It started 3 months ago. I had just moved into a dingy studio apartment in the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. The kind of place that always smells faintly like mildew, where the floor creaks even when no one's walking, and the neighbors are ghosts behind thin walls. I didn't mind. It was cheap. And more importantly, no one asked questions. I was desperate. I'd just lost my job at a distribution warehouse. Fired for clocking in late too many times. My car had been repossessed. My credit cards maxed out. I was barely eating. The kind of desperation that makes your skin feel tight on your bones. That's when I met Anton. He came into my life through a guy I barely knew, Russell. We met at a corner bar. Russell was the kind of man who always had stories, always had a deal going, and always knew a guy who knew a guy. That night, as I nursed a watered-down whiskey, he leaned across the table and said, "You still need cash, yeah? Real fast." I nodded, too tired to be suspicious. I think he saw the hollowness in my eyes. That quiet resignation people wear right before they do something they'll regret forever. "There's a delivery job," he said, "and one time only. Big payout. No questions asked." I should have asked questions. The next night, Anton showed up outside my building in a matte black SUV. He never stepped out of the vehicle, just rolled down the tinted window and motioned for me to get in. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine-scented air freshener, masking something else. Something metallic, faintly sour, like rust. Or old blood. Anton didn't look at me. He wore black leather gloves, even though it wasn't cold. His voice was sharp and flat. "You're going to drive a package from here to an address in Northern California. No detours, no opening it. You'll get 10,000 when it's delivered." 10,000? I repeated like an idiot. He turned to me then, slowly, and for the first time I saw his face. His eyes were a pale, icy blue, almost white, dead eyes, no life in them, just calculation. "One rule," he said, his tone suddenly hardening. "Do not open the box, not even a peek. If you do, the deal is off. You'll owe more than you can pay." I should have walked away, but when you've got $32 to your name and an eviction notice on your door, morality starts to feel like a luxury. He handed me a locked metal case. It was small, about the size of a microwave. Heavy, no markings, no labels. Just a single black padlock and a faint hum from inside, like a mechanical heart beating softly. He gave me a burner phone. "You'll receive one call. It'll give you the drop-off location. Do not answer any other calls, and whatever happens, do not stop driving." I drove through the night, cutting down I-5 with white knuckles on the wheel, and the case belted into the passenger seat like a child. The hum grew louder as the hours passed. I turned up the radio to drown it out, but the noise wasn't just audible. It was felt, like a vibration in my bones. My ears rang constantly, and my vision blurred at the edges. I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself it was just fatigue. Around 3 a.m., the phone rang. A voice, distorted, genderless, gave me an address outside a town I'd never heard of. Willow Creek, said someone would meet me there. Then the line went dead. That's when things got strange. My headlights began flickering as I drove deeper into the forest roads. The GPS on the dashboard glitched, rerouting endlessly until the screen turned black altogether. Cell signal died. And then I noticed the car behind me, A black sedan. No headlights, just a dark shape following too closely, too silently. I sped up. It sped up. I took random turns through the narrow roads, gravel crunching, trees closing in like walls, but it stayed right behind me. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, there was no driver. I swear to God, the front seat was empty. I floored it. I don't know how long I drove. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. Time felt warped. Trees started looking the same, looping like a broken video reel. Every so often, I thought I saw figures in the woods, tall, unmoving, watching, but when I blinked, they vanished. Then, just as suddenly, the road ended. A rusted metal gate barred my path. Beyond it, a clearing with an old barn, paint peeling, windows boarded, no lights, no signs of life. And the sedan behind me? Gone. I sat there, engine running, heart pounding. The box was shaking now. Not just humming, shaking, like something inside was alive and trying to get out. That was when the lock started to rattle. I screamed. Not a manly yell, just a raw animal sound. I grabbed the box and flung it into the back seat, then jumped out of the car. I didn't know what to do. My legs felt numb, my chest tight. And then the barn doors creaked open. A woman stepped out, pale as death, hair black and soaked like she'd just climbed out of a lake. She didn't speak, just held out a hand. I placed the box in her grasp without thinking. She cradled it like it was precious, like a newborn. Then she turned around and walked into the barn. The doors closed behind her. Silence. I stood there for a long time, long enough for the sun to begin bleeding into the horizon. Then the burner phone buzzed. One message, no number. Delivered. Payment received. You're marked. I stared at the screen, heart sinking. Marked? I didn't understand. Until I got home. The apartment door was open. Everything inside was gone. Not ransacked, gone. As if I'd never lived there. Walls bare, fridge empty, mattress missing. Even the air felt hollow. On the floor, carved into the wood, was a symbol I didn't recognize. A circle with jagged lines piercing through it, like a compass made of knives. And then I heard it. A hum, coming from under the floorboards. That was the first night I didn't sleep. The first night of many. And now, every time the phone rings, I wonder if it's them. Because Anton never said the deal ended. Only that it began. And whatever was in that box, I think it still wants me. I didn't move back into that apartment. Hell, I didn't even go back inside. After seeing the symbol carved into the floor and hearing that awful low hum rising from beneath the boards, I bolted. I got into the car, still dust-covered and splattered with pine needles from that forest drive, and just drove. I didn't have a destination. Only a need to put distance between myself and whatever I just delivered, and whatever had followed me back. I spent the next 3 nights sleeping in the car at different truck stops along I-84. I kept the engine running, doors locked, and a screwdriver clenched in my fist under the blanket. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face again. The one from the barn. Not her face exactly, because come to think of it, I never really saw it clearly. It was like the edges of her features didn't sit still, like she was vibrating or flickering just beyond the visible spectrum. Each night, I dreamed of her opening that box. Each night, the dream ended the same way, with me lying inside it, screaming, the lid sealing shut. The weird part? I kept waking up with dirt on my hands, under my nails. One time, a dead moth stuck to my jacket. Another night, my shoes were damp, even though it hadn't rained. I started wondering if I was sleepwalking, or worse, sleep going somewhere. On the fourth day, I checked into a cheap motel off the interstate near a dying town called Boardman. It was one of those forgotten places. Abandoned gas stations, boarded up diners, a railroad that hadn't run trains in years. The motel was barely standing. Cracked stucco walls, flickering neon sign, half buzzed out, and a night clerk who looked like he hadn't blinked in years. He didn't ask for ID, just handed me a key with the number 6 etched in plastic and said, "If you hear noises at night, don't open the door. They don't like being seen." I blinked. Excuse me? But he was already back behind the dusty partition, pretending I didn't exist. Room 6 smelled like mildew and warm copper. The sheets were stained yellow. The TV didn't work. I pushed a chair against the door and jammed the deadbolt tight. Then sat down on the edge of the mattress and tried to make sense of everything. I pulled out the burner phone. No signal, no calls. Just that one final message from the delivery. Delivered. Payment received. You're marked. What did that mean? And what the hell had I delivered? The longer I sat with those questions, the more I started to feel it again. That strange pressure. Like the air around me had weight. Like I was being watched. I checked the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked off. Not wrong exactly, but like it was lagging a second behind. I tilted my head. The reflection followed. Eventually, my stomach turned. I splashed water on my face and stared into the sink, trying to breathe. That's when I noticed it. Something scratched into the porcelain under the faucet. I had to lean in close to see it through the grime. It said, "You didn't deliver it. You released it." I froze. I hadn't told anyone about the job. No one knew where I was staying. How could something like that already be waiting for me? I backed out of the bathroom and sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to hyperventilate. Then, the humming started again. It was faint at first, barely audible, but it was there, vibrating through the floorboards of the motel. The same tone from the box, low, deep, mechanical, like a turbine slowly spinning up, and then tapping, tap, 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 from under the bed. I stood up so fast I almost tripped backward. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to look. Every inch of my body screamed not to look, but I did. I got on my knees, hands shaking, and lifted the blanket hanging over the side of the bed. Nothing, just the dusty, cracked linoleum, a few crumpled candy wrappers. A roach scuttled past. I exhaled, then the lights went out. Not just in my room, the whole motel. The buzzing neon sign outside sizzled and died. The hallway plunged into black. And then, someone knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my door. The chair rattled against the knob. I stared at it, heart hammering, frozen. Another knock, then a voice. Soft, hoarse, female. "You left it open." I pressed myself against the far wall, whispering "no, no, no," over and over. "You shouldn't have looked," she said. And then silence. I didn't sleep that night. I waited until morning light seeped in through the broken blinds before I opened the door. No one in the hallway, no footprints, no sign of anything, except the doorknob. It had been turned from the inside. I packed up and left immediately. Didn't check out, didn't say goodbye. I drove until I reached a library in a town called Hermiston. A quiet, dusty place. I needed answers. Something, anything, to explain what was happening. I started searching online for symbols, occult references, whispered rumors on message boards. After hours of digging through half-baked conspiracy posts and fringe theory videos, I found something that made my stomach drop. A forum post, 10 years old. Thread title, "I think I delivered something I wasn't meant to." The user, anonymous, described a situation eerily similar to mine. Desperate. Took a delivery job. Metal box, pale man with dead eyes. Rules, no peeking, no stops, no questions. And then things unraveling. He mentioned the hum, the sleepwalking, the woman in black. He ended the post with one sentence. "It doesn't want to be delivered, it wants to be shared." No replies, no updates. His account was deleted 3 days later. I sat in that library, surrounded by shelves of forgotten books, and I realized something. Whatever I brought into the world, it's not done with me. And worse, I think I'm starting to change. I looked down at my hands. The skin on my fingers was peeling. No, cracking. Tiny black veins threading through the gaps, pulsing faintly under the surface. And under my breath, without meaning to, I started humming. The same tone, over and over. Like a song I couldn't forget. Like a signal I couldn't stop sending. I left the library just before closing. The sun was setting, bleeding orange and purple across the Oregon sky. But even that beauty felt hollow now. Every sound I heard, wind through the branches, a distant dog barking, a car engine revving, sounded off, filtered, muffled, like I was standing one layer removed from reality. The hum was still there, low, persistent, beneath everything. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside me, in my bones, my blood. I drove aimlessly for hours, until I found myself in a place that didn't even show up on GPS. A cracked sign welcomed me to Hathir's Glen, though half the letters had peeled off. I don't remember making the turn. I don't remember deciding to go there. But when I pulled into that town square, quiet, colorless, the buildings sagging with time, I felt a jolt of something deep in my chest. Recognition. Even though I'd never been here before, I knew this place. The layout of the streets. The clock tower, frozen at 11:03. The rusted bus stop bench with a single black glove left on the seat. I knew these things the way you remember a nightmare after waking. Half-formed, blurry, but undeniable, there was one open building, a single-story structure with stained glass windows and the word archive carved above the door. I didn't want to go in, but my legs moved anyway. The air inside was dry and stale. The smell of dust and decay thick in my throat. No receptionist, no lights. Just rows and rows of filing cabinets. Hundreds, maybe thousands. And in the center, a circular desk, empty but for an ancient lamp that flickered weakly, casting long shadows that swayed even though there was no wind. The walls were lined with framed photos, black and white portraits of people with eyes scratched out. No names, no dates, just rows of empty stares. I approached one of the cabinets at random and pulled the drawer open. Inside, folders, each one labeled with numbers, long, complex sequences like barcodes. I grabbed the first folder and opened it. Inside were photographs. One was of me, taken from the side, walking out of the Portland bar where I first met Russell. Another, of me sitting in the black SUV, hands on the strange metal case. And another, worse, of me sleeping in the car at the truck stop. Mouth slightly open, blanket pulled to my chin, taken from inside the vehicle. I dropped the folder, staggered back. My name wasn't on any of them, but I knew They were mine. There were hundreds of folders just like it. Thousands. And every single one of them held evidence of someone being watched, followed, marked. I stumbled toward the central desk. Behind it, on the floor, was a trapdoor. It had no handle, just a symbol carved into the wood. The same one from my apartment floor. The compass made of knives. I didn't want to touch it. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the air around me grew heavier, vibrating with that same frequency. The hum now rising, like a crescendo building beneath my skin. My hand reached out on its own. As soon as I touched the wood, it opened. The door didn't swing. It melted, liquefying into black sludge that dripped into the darkness below. A staircase revealed itself, narrow and made of warped stone. The air was cold, damp, like something had been rotting for centuries down there. I descended. Each step I took echoed too long, like I was walking through a cavern much larger than what should have fit beneath that building. The walls were lined with mirrors, not full-length ones, but fractured shards, embedded in the stone at random angles, and in every reflection, I looked wrong. In one, my face was smiling when I wasn't. In another, my eyes were bleeding. In one, I wasn't there at all. Eventually, the stairs opened into a large chamber, circular, carved into the rock, lit by no visible source. Yet everything was bathed in a dim gray light like the color of fog. In the center stood a pillar, and on that pillar was the box, the same one I delivered, except now it was open, empty. As I approached, I realized the inside wasn't metal. It was lined with flesh, veined, pulsing faintly. It had been living. I felt something stir behind me, a presence. I turned and saw him. Anton. He stood at the edge of the room, dressed exactly as before. Black gloves, pale skin, dead eyes. But something was different now. His outline shimmered slightly, like heat rising off asphalt. His face was unfinished, features twitching, rearranging. "Why me?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. He tilted his head. "You made yourself available," he said. "All we needed was permission." "I didn't agree to this." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You accepted payment. The contract was sealed." I backed away from the pillar, heart hammering. What was in the box? He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured around the chamber. "You're not the first, you know. This place, it remembers every deal, every carrier, every vessel." I glanced around. The walls, the mirrors, the soft whispers I hadn't noticed before. They weren't echoes. They were voices, begging, crying, screaming. Some were whispering my name. "I want out," I said, my voice cracked. "I'll return the money. I'll burn the phone. Whatever it takes, just let me go." Anton took a step closer. "There is no going back." And then he vanished. I was alone. Except I wasn't. Something shifted behind the pillar. The air thickened. The humming returned, louder now, and more alive, like breathing. A hand reached out from inside the box. Thin, blackened, with fingers far too long. I ran. I don't remember how I got out. I just remember bursting into the night air, the cold burning my lungs, my clothes soaked with something sticky and dark. I drove for hours, days maybe. I don't remember sleeping. I don't remember eating. But the whispers followed me. Everywhere. In motel bathrooms, in car mirrors, in store windows. The reflections still twitch, still bleed. And sometimes, I wake up in strange places, standing outside houses I've never seen, forests I've never entered. Once, I woke up holding a folded piece of paper in my palm. One word written in jagged handwriting. Delivered. Now, the box is gone. But I still feel it. Inside me. Waiting. And I've started seeing others. People with that same haunted look. That same twitch in their reflection. That same hum in their voice when they speak. The product didn't go to one person. It's spreading. Whatever I delivered, it wasn't just meant for them. It was meant for us all. Story 4. Camping in the experimental maze. There were 6 of us when we set off. 3 couples, 3 tents, 1 weekend of supposed blissful disconnection from the digital world. Jess and I had been dating for nearly a year, and this trip into the woods was her idea. We need a break, she'd said. No phones, just nature, s'mores, and stars. I should have known something was off when we passed the last gas station, and the old man behind the counter warned us not to go beyond Devil's Ridge. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Said it was from a trapping accident, but the way he stared at our group, like he was counting how many would make it back, it stuck with me. We laughed it off, even took a selfie with him. Jess posted it with the caption, "Beware the hillbilly hunter last stop." I remember that now, and it makes my stomach churn. The road twisted up through the trees until it turned into gravel, then dirt, and finally disappeared entirely. We had to park and walk the last mile to the clearing we'd seen online, supposedly untouched wilderness. It lived up to its name. No reception, no people, just trees, silence, and a chill that didn't quite match the season. We set up camp near a creek. At first, everything was normal. We pitched the tents, gathered firewood, made jokes, drank a little. Jess and her best friend Maria were giggling about the boys. Brian, Maria's boyfriend, was already half drunk. The last couple, Darren and Lily, were quieter, newer. Darren was an outdoors guy, always fiddling with gear, while Lily clung to her phone like it was a lifeline, even though it had no signal. That night, we sat around the fire telling ghost stories. The usual stuff. Hook-handed killers, haunted hospitals, people waking up in bathtubs of ice-missing kidneys. We didn't notice the first sign until Maria pointed it out. "There's someone over there," she whispered, squinting across the creek. We all turned. There was nothing, just trees and shadows. But the fire crackled louder, and I noticed how still the woods had become. No crickets, no wind, just that pressing silence. "Probably an animal," Darren said, though he was gripping his flashlight a little too tightly. But the next morning, things weren't so easy to brush off. Jess was the first to notice the footprints, barefoot, human prints, pressed deep into the mud near the creek. They were erratic, zigzagging toward our tents, then disappearing back into the woods. No one said much, but unease settled in like fog. Brian tried to joke about it, saying we had a fanboy lurking in the woods. Nobody laughed. We tried to keep the day light, hiking, exploring, photos. But something always felt wrong, like we were being watched. You know that feeling, when the hairs on your neck rise for no reason? I had that all day. Every time I turned around, I expected to see someone ducking behind a tree. I saw shapes where there were none. That night, things escalated. Lily screamed around 2 a.m. When we rushed out of our tents, she was standing barefoot in the cold, staring into the trees. "I heard something," she stammered. It was right outside our tent. Breathing, whispering. We scanned with flashlights but found nothing. except one of Darren's knives stabbed into the trunk of a tree. None of us had touched it. "We're leaving in the morning," Jess told me. She tried to sound firm, but her voice was shaking. We never made it to morning. At 4:17 a.m., I woke to screaming. Maria's voice, ragged, breaking. I tore through the zipper of our tent and sprinted toward the noise, flashlight beam bouncing off trees and mist. What I found still keeps me up at night. Maria was on the ground, her eyes wide, mouth open in a scream that had already died. Her throat was torn. Not slit, torn, like something had ripped it open with jagged metal. There were deep gouges in her arms like she'd fought back, and her fingernails were broken and bleeding. Brian was nowhere to be seen. We called and searched until sunrise. No signs of him. No blood trail. Nothing. Just Maria's body, cold, stiffening, her terror frozen in place. Darren, ever the rational one, suggested we stay put until rescue arrived. But who was going to rescue us? There was no signal, no roads. The nearest gas station was miles away. Jess was sobbing. Lily was catatonic. So we decided to hike back to the car, carry Maria's body if we had to. We packed fast. We were ready to move within an hour. But when we reached the spot where we'd parked, the car was gone. At first we thought we were in the wrong place. But then we saw the deep tire tracks, new ones, leading off into the woods where no road should have been. That's when the panic really set in. Someone had moved our car. Someone had been there all along. We turned back toward camp, not knowing what else to do. But by the time we returned, the tents were shredded. Maria's body was gone. No blood, no drag marks. Just gone. It was like someone had reset the board. That night, we didn't light a fire. We didn't speak. We just sat together in a tight circle, backs to each other, knives out, listening. At some point, maybe midnight, I saw him. A man standing just beyond the fire ring, completely still. He wore a patchwork coat made of animal pelts. His beard was wild, and his eyes were the most disturbing thing. They weren't angry, they weren't wild, they were curious. He held something in his hand. It glinted silver in the moonlight. A tool? A blade? And then he smiled. Not a normal smile. A slow, deliberate stretch of his mouth. Like he was practicing the expression. Like he was rehearsing being human. He lifted a finger to his lips and disappeared into the trees. We didn't sleep. We didn't move. When dawn broke, we found something hanging from the tree near the creek. A rabbit, skinned, gutted, with a small note pinned to its side. Test 1. Primitive fear response. Effective. That's when it hit us. He wasn't just hunting. He was experimenting, studying our reactions, observing us like rats in a maze. And we had no idea how many tests he had left to run. We didn't bury the rabbit. None of us could bring ourselves to touch it. Not because it was grotesque, though it was, hanging limply by its legs, dark blood congealed beneath the carved skin. But because of the note. That damn note, written in neat, clinical handwriting. Like we were part of some twisted psychological study. Jess wanted to burn it. Darren said we needed to keep it for evidence, if we ever made it out. Lily didn't say anything at all. She just stared at the tree it hung from, eyes glazed and glassy. Me? I just stood there, realizing for the first time that we were never meant to leave. By noon, we had a plan. Darren's plan, really. He said the best option was to move downhill and follow the creek. Eventually, it had to lead to a river, maybe even civilization. If not, at least we'd keep moving, stay unpredictable. Staying in one place meant giving him the upper hand. And none of us wanted to see what test 2 might be. We packed what we could salvage. The tents were useless, ripped to shreds like something had gone at them with claws. Food was low. Maria's bag was gone, along with most of our supplies. Even now, I wonder if he took it just to watch us struggle. The forest changed as we walked. At first it was just the usual, pine and fir, the occasional patch of sunlight breaking through. But by the second hour, the trees had grown closer together, denser, more warped. Branches arched like ribs overhead, filtering out light until it felt like dusk. That's when we found the first cage. It was rusted, half buried in the dirt, big enough for a human. Inside were bones, too long for any animal I knew. They weren't fresh, but they were deliberately placed, arranged in a sitting position, facing the trail. Lily screamed. Jess vomited. There was something nailed to the tree above it. Another note. Test 12. Isolation and starvation. Unsuccessful. Result. Delirium. Cannibalistic behavior. We didn't speak for a long time after that. Just kept walking. Every now and then, I'd hear something behind us. A crack of a branch. A shuffle too light to be a deer. When I turned, I saw nothing. But I felt it. Like the forest had grown a new set of eyes. Watching, waiting, taking notes. We stopped to rest near a patch of boulders around 4 p.m. The air smelled sour, like something had rotted into the soil. Jace leaned against me trembling. Her hands were ice cold. Darren tried to stay upbeat. We keep following the creek. We'll hit a ranger post or a lake or something. Do you believe that? I asked. He didn't answer. Later that evening, while we made a small fire, Jess wandered off to pee. I heard her scream, sharp, raw. We sprinted toward the sound, stumbling through roots and brambles. I found her on her knees, near a hollow log. Her flashlight pointed at something inside. It was a video camera, half buried, still warm. The battery was dead, but the SD card was intact. Back at the fire, Darren hooked it up to his phone. There were 6 video files, all labeled with dates, spanning the last 3 years. The one from 8 months ago showed a group just like us. 5 people, laughing, hiking, setting up camp. By the third video, one of them was missing. The fourth showed the remaining 4 sitting by a fire, visibly shaken, whispering about someone in the woods. The fifth was from inside a cage. One man, skinny and bleeding from his feet, weeping into the lens. "He feeds me rats," he whispered. "He won't let me die." The 6th and final video was short, just 3 seconds. A close-up of someone's face. It was Maria from 2 nights ago. She was alive in the clip, mouth gagged, eyes wide. Behind her, in the dark, something moved. A blurred shape with a pale hand pressing down on her shoulder. Then the video cut out. Jess threw the phone. Lily finally started to cry. That night we didn't sleep. None of us dared close our eyes, not even Darren. Around 2 a.m., we heard the whistling, not a melody, just 2 soft notes, repeated. Who? Who? Like someone calling for an animal. It circled us in the dark, sometimes close, sometimes far, always moving, always there. Then we heard footsteps, slow, dragging steps that paused just outside our line of sight. I held Jess close, one hand over her mouth to keep her from sobbing too loudly. Darren crept to the edge of our camp with his knife, and then, nothing. The whistling stopped. The footsteps vanished. We waited until dawn before moving again. By morning, Lily was gone. She'd been sleeping beside me. I didn't hear a thing, No scream, no movement, just gone. Where she'd been, we found another note, pinned to a tree with a thick, curved hunting knife. Test 23, extraction without detection, highly effective, sleep stage 3. That's when I cracked. I started screaming at the trees, at the sky, at him. I shouted that we weren't lab rats, that we were people, that we would kill him if we ever got the chance. I think Darren wanted to slap me, but instead he just looked away. Just didn't say a word. She was slipping somewhere far away, somewhere that felt safer. Around midday, we stumbled into a small clearing. At the center stood a cabin, rotting, sunken into the earth like it had been waiting for us. No windows, one door. The roof sloped downward like it had a spine. A small wind chime of teeth hung from the awning. I knew what Darren was thinking. Shelter. I told him it was a trap. Jess said she couldn't walk another mile. So we went in. The inside was worse. Animal skulls lined the walls. Hooks dangled from the ceiling, some with scraps of fabric still clinging to them. A table sat in the center, stained with layers of blood, sawdust, and something thick and black. On the far wall was a map, hand-drawn. It showed the entire forest, our path, our campsite, even us. Little figures made from wire and bone. 2 of them were knocked over. One had a red thread wrapped around its neck. Maria, Brian, Lily. The last 2 standing were bound together at the wrist, Jess and me. Darren touched one of the hooks. The door slammed shut. The sound of the door slamming wasn't just loud, it was final. It echoed through the rotting walls of the cabin like the snap of a bone, followed by a silence so deep it felt like the air itself had collapsed. Jess screamed. Darren lunged at the door, but it didn't budge. It was bolted from the outside, and we weren't alone inside. There was a breathing, low, rattling, like someone with a collapsed lung trying to stay quiet. It came from the shadows near the back wall, just past the map with the wire figurines. Darren aimed his flashlight toward it, and I swear, for half a second, I saw something move. A figure, crouched low, crawling, then the light flickered, and it was gone. Jess was gripping my arm so tightly, her nails drew blood through my shirt. Darren turned a full circle, knife in hand, back to the wall. "Whoever's in here," he said, "you come out now." Silence. Then the breathing again. Closer. I spotted a ladder against the far wall. It led to a trapdoor in the floor. The boards surrounding it were darker, slick with something thick, grease, or maybe blood. It reeked, like rotting meat and rusted metal. I didn't want to go down there, but I wanted to stay in that room even less. We made the decision in whispers. Darren would go down first, then me, then Jess. He didn't like it. He wanted me to take Jess and bolt out a window, break it if we had to. But the windows were nailed shut, thick boards crisscrossing them like a coffin lid. There was no way out but down. The ladder creaked under Darren's weight. The second he reached the bottom, he gagged. "Jesus," he called up. There's something dead down here." He wasn't wrong. The basement wasn't really a basement. It was a crawl space, maybe 4 feet tall at most. We had to hunch over, knees bent, hands brushing against damp soil and tangled roots. It was like being inside something alive, breathing, pulsing. The stench was unbearable. There were dozens of cages. Most were empty. One had a dead raccoon inside, its eyes eaten out. Another held a pile of bones, some animal, some not. But one cage, far in the back, had something moving inside it. We approached slowly. My heart was thudding so hard, I felt it in my ears. Inside the cage was a man, or what was left of one. He was rail thin, naked, covered in bruises and old wounds. His beard was long, matted. His left hand was missing. His right eye had been gouged out and sewn shut with black thread. But he was alive. He looked at us with the one eye that still worked. "Too late," he whispered. "You're already part of it." Darren dropped to one knee. "Who did this? How long have you been here?" The man started to laugh. It was soft at first, almost a giggle. Then it grew louder. Frenzied, his head tilted back, and he said, "You're the next test. You think he trapped you? He built this place around you, like an ant farm, like a maze." That's when we heard the scraping noise above us. Slow, deliberate, metal on wood. We scrambled back toward the ladder, but a heavy, wet thud dropped down right in front of it. It was a deer head, still fresh. Its eyes bulged from the skull, tongue lolling out. A tag was stapled to one antler. Test 37, confined stress response. Observed secondary breakdown. Jess started screaming and wouldn't stop. We had no choice but to go back up. When we reached the cabin again, it had changed. Not physically, but something about it. The smell, the shadows. It felt like it had closed in. Jess clung to me, shaking, mumbling something I couldn't make out. Darren paced furious, muttering about tracking the bastard down. I turned to look at the wire dolls on the map again. The two bound together, Jess and me, were now slightly bent forward, like they were kneeling, and a third had been added. It was tied upside down. Its head was missing. "Lily." "Darren?" I whispered. "Someone came in while we were down there." He nodded, jaw clenched. "He's here. He's watching us." Then we heard a click. A voice, electronic, distorted, came from a speaker hidden somewhere in the walls. "Welcome," it said. "You've reached the midpoint. Congratulations." We froze. Subjects 3 and 4. Increasing signs of paranoia, hallucination, and separation fatigue. Control test has been removed. Proceed to the red zone. "What the hell is the red zone?" I shouted. The voice didn't answer. The cabin lights flickered, briefly, like a dying bulb. And in that flicker, I saw a shape standing outside the window. Just for a second. A face. White. Featureless, like a mannequin smeared with dirt. It didn't move. It didn't blink. And then it was gone. We bolted out the front door. No plan. No direction. Just away. The trees swallowed us instantly. I don't remember how long we ran. Hours, maybe. The sun was low when we stopped, panting. Knees soaked in mud, lungs on fire. Darren collapsed beside a fallen log. Jess was wheezing, her legs streaked with cuts. I leaned against a tree and closed my eyes. That's when I heard it. Not footsteps, not the whistle. A hum, low and mechanical, like a generator. I opened my eyes and saw a glint of silver through the trees. A metal fence. We pushed through the underbrush and found a compound, an actual facility hidden in the woods. Chain link fence, barbed wire, floodlights. There was a sign on the front gate, faded, rusted. Property of Hayden Research, Behavioral Simulation Zone B, no trespassing. Below it, in red spray paint, not a test anymore, just collapsed. I caught her before she hit the ground. Her lips were cracked, her skin was pale. Darren tried the gate. It was unlocked. We crept in. The place looked abandoned. A few trailers, old wires, cameras hanging from trees like rotting fruit. Inside one trailer, we found a wall of screens. Most were static, but a few showed grainy black and white feeds of us, walking, sleeping, screaming, Every moment of our trip, every decision. I stared at one screen that showed me holding Jess in the cabin. And in the corner of the screen, a shape stood behind me. A hand outstretched inches from my shoulder. I never felt it, never saw it, but it was there. We found something else in the trailer, a notebook, page after page of notes, clinical, cold, detailing our emotional responses, stress thresholds, sleeping patterns, even our urine color. On the last page was a checklist. Subject 1, terminated subject 2, assimilated subject 3, active subject 4, active subject 5, removed subject 6, escape, retrieval in progress. I don't know which number I am, but I know what's coming. We're not being hunted anymore. We're being retrieved. Story 5, the thing that kidnapped me wasn't human. I always thought I'd see it coming. The kind of horror that changes your life. The kind you read about in news articles or watch in late-night documentaries. I imagined warning signs, gut feelings, shadowy vans, or strange men lingering too long at gas stations. But when it happened to me, it was quiet, subtle, surgical. It started like any other Wednesday. I just finished my night shift at the diner on 38th and Main, a hole-in-the-wall place that served cold pie and burnt coffee to truckers and regulars who never smiled. The sky was still dark when I stepped outside, my breath curling in the air like thin smoke. I remember checking my phone, 3:47 a.m. No new messages, just the soft static buzz of silence. I walked the 6 blocks to my apartment like I always did. Hood up, pepper spray in hand, one headphone in, volume low. I was cautious, I was careful. I didn't hear footsteps behind me. I didn't notice the car idling. Nothing. But when I turned the key to my front door, it wasn't my apartment anymore. I stepped inside and was hit by the cold. Not the usual drafty kind from old pipes or cracked windows. This was deliberate, mechanical, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. I froze. Something was wrong. My floor lamp had been moved. The couch cushions were crooked. And then, before I could scream, a sharp chemical scent hit me. Sweet, metallic. The last thing I remember was the shape behind me. And then darkness. I woke up lying on a mattress that smelled like mildew and bleach. My arms were bound at the wrists with soft fabric. No rope burn, no bruising, but tight. My legs were free. My throat was dry. The room was dim, lit by a single bare bulb that flickered every few seconds, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay alive. The walls were concrete, painted over in a sickly beige. No windows, no visible door, no sound. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The air was still. The silence was too complete. But when I sat up, a sharp pain lanced through my skull, and I let out an involuntary whimper. It echoed. Someone had engineered the silence. There was a camera in the top corner of the room, barely visible, housed in a black dome. Watching. I shouted, I begged, I cursed, I cried. Nothing. No voice from a speaker. No threats. No ransom demands. No footsteps. Just the hum of the light, the constant, inescapable watching. Hours passed, or maybe days. It was impossible to tell time. The light never changed. There was no toilet, only a plastic bucket in the corner. A tray of food appeared once, silently pushed through a thin slot near the floor. White rice and water. The tray vanished again. The next time I woke up, I started hearing things on the second day. A child laughing, scratching behind the walls. My name whispered low and fast like wind through a cracked window. I banged on the walls until my hands bled. The whispering didn't stop. It just changed, became more rhythmic, almost as mocking. Lena, Lena. That's when I realized something chilling. He hadn't said a word to me, not since I woke up. Whoever he was, he didn't want to talk. He wanted me to unravel on my own. Eventually, I started noticing the changes. One morning, the mattress was gone, just the cold floor. Then the next day, it returned, but covered in fresh red handprints, as if someone had been dragging themselves across it. They were still wet. I touched one. It was warm. Another day, I woke up with different clothes on. I hadn't changed them. They were mine, but not the ones I'd been wearing before. And there was something else. The scent. Not mine. The shirt smelled like tobacco and sweat. Like someone had worn it first. I tried to keep a tally of the days by scratching marks into the wall with a rusted nail I pried from the floorboard. But one day, all the marks were gone. The wall was smooth again. Clean. He was editing my reality. The worst moment came on what I assumed was day 7. The light flickered violently, and for a full minute, everything went pitch black. I couldn't breathe. I pressed against the wall trying to find something, anything to anchor me. And then I felt it. Fingers. Not mine. Reaching from behind me. Just for a moment, light pressure on my lower back. I screamed, but the lights came back on before I could react. I was alone. There was nothing there, but the smell of old cologne lingered in the air. Heavy, glowing, intentional. I started speaking to the camera. Not pleading, not crying, challenging. Who are you? What do you want from me? I won't break. But I was lying. I was already cracking, dreaming of my parents, old friends, places I'd never visit again. I hallucinated the sound of my own voice screaming back at me. One time, I swore I saw myself standing across the room, smiling. The worst part, that version of me looked happy. On what I believed to be day 9, a speaker crackled for the first time. My heart leapt. I thought I might finally get answers. Maybe even a clue. But all I heard was a distorted recording of my own voice from earlier. Me, crying, saying I wouldn't break. Then silence again. And that's when I knew this wasn't about ransom, or sex, or murder. This was about control, domination, design. He didn't want my body. He wanted my mind. And the scariest part? He was winning. I used to think the human mind had limits, like a wall you could lean against before you went completely insane. But now I know better. That wall doesn't exist. It just stretches and bends, warping into something unrecognizable the longer you're trapped inside your own thoughts. By the time the room changed again, I didn't know what was real anymore. The light was the first thing to go. The bulb that had flickered on and off for days, weeks, was now permanently dark. I woke up in silence and blackness, so thick it felt like liquid. No sound, not even the hum of electricity. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. There was breathing, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere behind me. Not the kind that someone tries to hide. It was intended, timed. A presence that wanted to be heard but not seen. I held my breath, and it held its, matching me, mocking me. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just lay still, waiting for it to make the first move. But it didn't. It never did. Hours passed, maybe longer, and I drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by the phantom sound of that breath, that unspoken threat. When the lights returned, so did something else. A mirror. It was mounted on the far wall. Tall, ornate, gold-framed, like something ripped out of an old Victorian mansion, out of place in this prison of concrete and mildew. I approached it slowly, half expecting the glass to shatter or for a hand to reach out from it. But nothing happened. At first, I thought it was just a mirror. Then I noticed the delay. My reflection was off by half a second. I tilted my head. The reflection lagged. I raised a hand. It followed late, like a bad video call. I stared into my own eyes, trying to understand if it was some kind of trick. But then my reflection did something I didn't. It smiled. A slow, crawling grin that spread across its face. My face, while mine stayed frozen in terror. I fell backward, scrambling away from the mirror. The reflection stopped smiling. It went back to mimicking me perfectly, as if nothing had happened. But I knew what I saw. That was no glitch. It was a warning. The next morning, or what I guessed was morning, there was something new on the floor. A book, bound in dark leather. No title on the spine. It hadn't been there before. I opened it cautiously, flipping through the first few pages. They were blank. Until page 10, then the writing began. Neat, precise, almost too perfect. And the words were mine. Not just mine. My thoughts. Exact phrasing. Things I hadn't said out loud. Thoughts I'd had during the worst nights. Doubts I'd breathed so deep, I forgot I even had them. He watches you even when you sleep. You don't matter to anyone anymore. You're not going to survive this. My hands shook. I dropped the book, but it landed face up, the ink still wet. I wasn't just being watched. I was being recorded, psychologically dissected, observed like a specimen in a glass tank. I ripped out the pages, hoping to destroy whatever sick diary this was. But they grew back, instantly, as if the book itself remembered. That was the first time I heard the voice. Low, calm, male. You're doing well, Lena. I froze. It came from the speaker in the ceiling, warped and distant, like it had been filtered through static. You're adapting faster than I expected. Who are you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A pause, then softly. I'm what you make me. He didn't speak again for a long time, but the room began to change faster. Every few hours, something was different. One day, I woke up in a replica of my childhood bedroom. Down to the smallest detail. Scratches on the headboard. The faded poster of horses on the wall. The smell of the lavender detergent my mother used. I was 13 again. I nearly broke down. But then I noticed the camera in the corner. This one not hidden, but exposed. Big. Obvious. Like he wanted me to know he was still watching. And the door? Fake. Just a painted outline. I screamed, slammed my fists against it until my knuckles split. The air turned cold again. And the voice returned. You're still holding on to the illusion of control, it said. You think this is about control? I shouted. This is torture. A pause. No, Lena, this is truth. I don't know when I started seeing the other people. Sometimes, when I woke up too fast from a nightmare, I'd see a shadow just at the edge of the room. Human-shaped, unmoving. A man, I think, tall, dressed in black. I'd blink, and he'd be gone. Other times I'd hear humming, low and familiar. A lullaby my mother used to sing. But it wasn't her voice. It was his. And it was wrong. Slower. Broken. I realized something awful. He was using my own memories against me. Reconstructing my past and warping it until I couldn't trust my own mind. Replacing the comfort of nostalgia with dread. The scariest part came days later, I woke up in his room. I don't know how I knew it was his, but everything in it reeked of him. The smell of cologne, the polished black desk, the shelves full of medical books and surgical diagrams, dozens of notebooks, all filled with sketches of me, sleeping, eating, crying. In some of them, I wasn't even human. Just lines and variables, like he was reducing me to an experiment. There was one drawing of my skull, split in half, labeled with parts: fear, compliance, resistance. And next to it, scribbled in frantic handwriting, "She doesn't break like the others." That was the moment I knew there were more. I wasn't his first. Maybe I wouldn't be his last. I found the knife under his bed. Small, rusted, but real. Maybe he left it there on purpose. Maybe it was a test. I gripped it so hard my hand ached. For the first time since this began, I felt something close to power. The idea that maybe I could end it on my terms. But I didn't use it. Not yet. Because now I'm thinking differently. I'm watching, listening, planning. If he wants to dissect my mind, then fine. I'll let him think he's winning. For now. But he made one mistake. He let me see his room. And in his obsession, he showed me something more valuable than hope. He has limits too. He made a mistake. That single thought looped in my head like a lifeline, fragile and fraying, but still intact. He had shown me too much. His room, his tools, his obsession. It wasn't just control he craved, it was recognition. He wanted me to see how clever he was, how complete his design was. But by letting me glimpse the mind behind the madness, he cracked open the first real weakness I'd seen. He wasn't a god. He was just a man. A sick, methodical, twisted man, but still human. I clung to that. The knife I found stayed hidden under the mattress in his room. I didn't take it with me when the room changed again. I was afraid the act of stealing it might trigger something, like the entire space was wired to detect my intent. And maybe it was. When I woke up next, I wasn't in concrete anymore. The new room was soft. The walls were covered in thick blood-red velvet. It reminded me of an old opera theater or a funeral parlor. Every surface absorbed sound. The floor beneath my feet was carpeted, plush, almost inviting. Almost. There were no cameras this time, or at least none I could find. But I knew he was watching. I could feel his presence like static behind my eyes. At the center of the room sat a round table, and on it, an old-fashioned telephone. Black rotary, no cord. I didn't touch it at first. I circled the table for hours, maybe days. It never rang, but I knew it would. It finally did on what I guessed was the third day. The sound shattered the silence like a scream, shrill, mechanical, repeating every second with perfect precision. I didn't answer right away. I stood inches from the receiver, my hand trembling above it. My instinct screamed not to pick up, but my curiosity, his curiosity, was stronger. I lifted it slowly, held it to my ear. Nothing. Then, Lena. His voice. But this time it wasn't warped by static or filtered through speakers. It was clear, crisp, and disturbingly calm. "I'm proud of you," he said. I said nothing. "You're adapting faster than I anticipated. You're not like the others." There it was again. That phrase. The others. I tried to ask, but my voice cracked. "What did you do to them?" A pause. "They broke." Then the line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The silence had weight to it, like someone pressing down on my chest. I started hearing soft tapping, fingertips drumming gently on the walls. Not fast, not frantic, just patient, waiting. I curled into the corner and tried to disappear inside myself, but sleep came anyway, and with it, the dream. It wasn't like the usual ones. This one was invasive. I dreamt I was strapped to a table. My eyes were held open by metal hooks. Above me, bright surgical lights buzzed. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, and he was there. Not masked, not distorted, just a man. Ordinary, average, brown hair, grain at the temples, no smile, no emotion. He leaned close and whispered, "We're almost done mapping you." I woke up screaming, and for the first time, I wasn't alone. There was a woman sitting across from me, early 30s maybe, pale, lips dry and cracked. Her eyes were wide and wild. She didn't speak, just stared. Her hands were trembling. Who are you?" I asked. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened her mouth and let out a low, broken sound. Half sob, half laugh. Then she whispered, "He made me forget my name." I crawled toward her. Slowly, carefully. "You're real? You're real!" She nodded once, eyes darting to the mirror, now hanging on the wall. Not the velvet walls anymore. We were back in concrete. And in the mirror, we weren't alone. There were dozens of us, all women, all watching. But in the room, only the two of us. I turned back to the mirror and noticed something else. The others weren't moving. They were frozen, held in place, staring directly at us, like mannequins or memories. "I tried to warn them," the woman said, "but none of them listened. And then they stopped coming." "What do you mean?" She looked at me, through me. "He removes them, deletes them, one by one. From your memory first, then from this place, but not from him." I shook my head. "That doesn't make sense. How can someone?" She stood suddenly, her bones cracking irritably. "Don't let him find your core. That's how he wins." I tried to stop her, to ask what she meant, but she stepped into the corner and vanished, like she was never there. That night the walls began to bleed, thin trails of dark red leaking down the velvet, pooling at the baseboards. The smell was coppery, familiar. The phone rang again. I picked it up immediately. "What did you do to her?" I demanded. He chuckled softly. "She was never there, Lena." "Yes, she was." "Are you sure?" I turned to look, but there was no blood, no velvet, no mirror. Just four plain walls. Just me. I dropped the phone, backed away. My chest tightened. He was inside my head now. I didn't know what was real, what had been implanted, what I'd imagined. But something was changing. I was changing. He wanted me to break, but I wasn't breaking. I was becoming. In the following days, I began testing the environment, whispering lies to the camera, pretending to cry when I wasn't scared, hiding my real thoughts behind mundane actions. If he was studying me, I'd give him false data. Sometimes I heard the voice again, irritated now, shorter. "Lena, you're regressing. Lena, this will only prolong your stay." That's when I knew it was working. He wasn't just observing, he was reacting. Then came the final shift, one morning, or maybe it was night. I woke up in a hospital room. Fluorescent lights, white walls, IV drip in my arm, heart monitor beeping steadily. For a split second, I thought I'd been rescued. A nurse walked in, smiling, too wide. "How are we feeling today, Lena?" I blinked. "Where am I?" She adjusted the drip. "You're safe. You're in recovery. From what? Her smile didn't change. Then I noticed the reflection in the stainless steel tray beside her. He was standing in the doorway, watching, not in a mask, not behind a speaker, but there, in the flesh. And he whispered, "Let's see how well you pretend now." That was 3 days ago, or 3 years. I don't know anymore, but I still have the knife, hidden in the mattress under his bed. And I'm waiting. Let him keep watching. Let him keep studying. Because he made a mistake. And this time, it's not just hope I'm holding on to. It's revenge. Story 6. Don't look into the corner. We adopted the dog in late October, right before Halloween. The shelter had named him Rusty, a shaggy brown mutt with intelligent eyes and a crooked left ear. He was small but quick, and the minute my 8-year-old son Max knelt beside the kennel, the dog pressed his nose to the bars and wagged his tail like they'd known each other in another life. "He likes me," Max whispered, glancing up at me with that cautious hope only kids carry. He did. I saw it too. So we brought Rusty home that day. Our house sat on the edge of a quiet town in upstate New York, a 2-story colonial we'd bought for cheap after my wife's job relocated us from Chicago. It was the kind of old house that creaked when the wind pushed through the eaves and smelled faintly of dust, no matter how often you cleaned. My wife Kelly called it charming. I called it a fixer-upper with too much character. But it had space. For Max, for Kelly's art studio, and now for Rusty. The first 3 days were perfect. Rusty adjusted quickly. He was house-trained, friendly, and slept at the foot of Max's bed like a little guardian. Every morning, Max would come downstairs bragging that Rusty had stayed up all night protecting him from closet monsters. We'd laugh, ruffle his hair, and get on with our routines. Then the barking started. It was always in the living room, always at the same corner. We first noticed it on a Wednesday night, around 2 a.m. Rusty's barks pierced through the floor like an alarm clock dipped in acid. I stumbled downstairs in my pajamas, expecting maybe he'd heard raccoons in the attic or caught sight of a deer through the window. But there was nothing. Just Rusty, standing rigid in the center of the living room, teeth bared, hackles up. He was fixated on the far corner between the old upright piano and the floor lamp we barely used. "Rusty?" I whispered. "What you barking at?" He didn't look back at me, didn't even blink. Then, without warning, he charged toward the corner, skidding into the baseboard with a sharp yelp, as if he'd collided with something solid. He jumped back instantly, tail between his legs, then crept backward, whining low in his throat. There was nothing there. I turned on all the lights, checked behind the piano, shook the curtains, ran my hand along the wall, feeling stupid. Nothing. Eventually, Rusty calmed down. He followed me back upstairs, but didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat upright in the hallway, staring down the stairs toward the living room. Every so often, he growled. By morning, I'd convinced myself it had been a mouse, or maybe the shadows were playing tricks on him. But it happened again, and again. Every night, always between 1 and 3 a.m., Rusty would bark at that same spot, then charge at it, then recoil in terror like something had swatted him away. Max stopped sleeping through the night. He'd come into our room, clutching Rusty, saying, "He's scared again, Daddy." I think the corner's making him scared. We moved the furniture around, put his crate in our room. even blocked the hallway with a baby gate to stop him from going downstairs at night. But somehow every time, Rusty would end up back in the living room, snarling at the corner. I started locking our bedroom door, and somehow he'd still get out. Maybe he's just weird, Kelly said, though she didn't sound convinced. You know, some dogs fixate on spots. Maybe he had a bad experience. Sure, I said. But why always the same corner? That Friday, I tried something different. I stayed up, drank 2 mugs of black coffee, curled into the couch with a blanket, and waited. Kelly and Max had gone to sleep, the house gone quiet, except for the wind rustling dead leaves outside. Rusty was asleep on the floor near the fireplace. He'd been calm all evening, but right as the grandfather clock chimed 2 a.m., he bolted upright like a soldier hearing gunfire. His ears twitched, nose lifted. Then the growl started, low and mean. I followed his gaze. The corner, I squinted. Something shifted there, just for a moment. A slight warping of the shadows, like heat rising off asphalt. Rusty barked and lunged. This time, I was watching. His body stopped midair, like he'd hit a wall that wasn't there. His paws never touched the corner. He hovered for a blink too long, limbs kicking in panic, then dropped straight down. I scrambled to him, heart in my throat. He was shaking, eyes wide with fear. But I swear to you, I swear, I felt something cold brush against my leg as I knelt to pick him up. I didn't tell Kelly. I didn't know what to say. The next morning, Max asked me if the corner monster had talked to Rusty again. Did you say talked? I asked. He nodded. Rusty hears it. That's why he barks. He told me. I froze. Rusty told you? Not in words, Max said. But I can feel it. It's saying, go back. You shouldn't have brought him. I didn't know what the hell to make of that. He was just a kid. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe he'd heard us talking in hushed voices at night. But something had changed in Rusty. He'd become more alert. During the day, he'd patrol the house like a sentry, always circling back to that damn corner. He wouldn't bark, not anymore. Just watch and whimper. Sometimes I'd catch him tilting his head like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then came the scratches. They started appearing on the walls around the corner. Thin, vertical marks, like someone had taken a small knife and dragged it downward again and again. Kelly thought it was Rusty, but the dog didn't have claws that sharp. I tried painting over them. The next morning, they were back, longer, deeper, crossing over each other like tally marks. 5 days in, 27 marks. Then Max started sleepwalking. The first time, I found him in the living room, standing directly in the corner, eyes wide open, murmuring something in a language I didn't recognize. Rusty sat behind him, trembling, but not barking. When I touched Max's shoulder, he screamed, blood-curdling, like I was tearing him from something. He collapsed into my arms and started crying. It told me you're next, he whispered. I didn't sleep that night, and when the shadows in that corner shifted again, this time without Rusty present, I knew something had come into our house, and it wasn't finished with us yet. It's strange how quickly a home stops feeling like a home. I used to love our living room. The bay window let in soft morning light, and Kelly had arranged her easel near the fireplace. It was where we put up our Christmas tree, where Max opened his gifts each year, and where Rusty had first dozed contentedly on the rug. Now I couldn't step into it without my chest tightening. Something lingered there. Not just the barking, not just the shadow. It was deeper, thicker. Like the air was heavier in that room. Like it didn't want us there anymore. Rusty refused to enter during the day. He'd sit at the threshold, stare in, then turn away with a whine that sounded almost guilty. We were all feeling it, each in our own way. Kelly was working less, her paintings half finished and leaning against the studio wall like forgotten thoughts. She was distant, drifting from room to room like a ghost, always rubbing her arms like she was cold. Max, he'd stopped smiling. I caught him drawing one afternoon. Just silent, hunched over the kitchen table, scribbling hard into the paper. I asked what he was working on, and he slid it over without a word. It was our living room, but not as it looked. The walls were blackened, warped. The fireplace spewed something red and thick. And the corner, that corner, was scribbled in pitch black crayon until it tore through the paper. And standing there was a creature, 7 feet tall, thin arms, long fingers, no face. Next to it was Rusty and Max. I dream about it, he said quietly. Almost every night now. Sometimes it asked me questions. I didn't know how to respond. I just took the drawing and stuffed it in a drawer. That night, I set up my phone on a tripod in the living room. It was dumb, I know, cliché even, but I needed proof of something, anything. The next morning, I checked the footage. The first hour was uneventful. Rusty pacing in the hall, circling the baby gate. Then the second hour hit. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the room darkened. Not all at once. More like a shadow seeped in, stretching from the corner outward like spilled ink. Rusty growled off-screen. Then something moved. It wasn't a figure, not clearly. More like the space bent inward, rippling as if the room were folding onto itself in that one spot. I couldn't breathe as I watched it. My hands turned clammy. And then came the whisper. Faint, barely audible. But there. He brought him here. It remembers. The camera died immediately after. I threw up in the sink. We needed answers. I brought Rusty to the vet under the excuse of a behavioral issue. While they examined him, I sat in the waiting area, hands shaking, pretending to scroll through emails. The walls had little posters about separation anxiety and flea treatments. None of them said anything about dogs attacking invisible monsters. The vet was kind but confused. He's in perfect health, she said. No signs of trauma, no neurological issues. Whatever's upsetting him, it's not physical. I asked carefully if she'd ever seen a dog respond this way to a particular place in a house. She hesitated, then said, once, years ago, a rescue from Louisiana wouldn't go near the basement of its new home. Later they found. She trailed off, eyes scanning the room. Let's just say it wasn't the dog that needed help. I pressed her. What did they find? She shook her head. They didn't tell me, but they moved out within the week, left the dog with a neighbor. That night, Kelly screamed in her sleep. I ran into the bedroom and found her thrashing in bed, eyes open but unfocused. I tried waking her, but she flailed at me. When she finally came to, she was crying, actual tears, soaking the pillow. I was in the living room, she whispered. I couldn't move, and it was there, standing in the corner, watching me. What did it look like? I don't know. I couldn't see its face, but it knew me. It kept saying, not yours, not yours. You took him. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. Neither did I. The next morning, we agreed to get help. Not police, not a doctor. We needed something else. Her name was Miriam, a friend of a friend. Medium spiritual advisor. Call it what you want. I didn't believe in that stuff. I still don't. Not fully. But at that point, I would have invited a priest, a rabbi, and a witch doctor under the same roof if it meant peace. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon, wearing a long black coat despite the 70-degree weather. The moment she stepped into the house, her face changed. "You didn't tell me it was anchored," she said quietly. "Anchored?" I asked. She didn't answer. She walked into the living room, paused, then turned sharply toward the corner. Rusty growled. She didn't even flinch. "There's a presence here, not just a ghost. It's old, older than this house. It's bound to something one of you brought in." Kelly looked at me. I looked at Rusty. "You mean the dog?" Miriam approached him slowly. Rusty backed away, tail down, ears flat. "No," she murmured. "Not the dog. Something that came with him." She closed her eyes, whispered something in a language I didn't recognize. Then she knelt, pressing her palm to the floorboards near the corner. "Underneath," she said, "there's something buried here." We didn't wait. I grabbed a crowbar from the garage and started ripping up the floor. Max watched from the hallway. Miriam told him not to come any closer. The boards creaked, splintered, popped loose. And then I hit it. Metal. A small tin box. Rusted shut. I pried it open, and immediately the room grew cold. Inside was a strip of black cloth, a lock of dark hair, and a tiny shriveled animal bone. Miriam gasped. "You awakened it," she said. "You broke its sleep when you brought Rusty, that dog's bloodline. It remembers. This isn't a haunting. It's a claim." I stared at her, at the box, at the shadows crawling up the corner wall. Max whispered from behind me, "Daddy, it's getting closer." Rusty barked once, sharp, terrified, and then the lights flickered out. Something stepped into the room, and it wasn't human. The lights went out, and I don't mean a flicker, like a bulb dying or a power surge. I mean a complete, suffocating blackness that swallowed the room whole. I could still feel everyone around me. Max's tiny breath trembling behind me. Rusty's low whimper, Kelly somewhere near the hallway, whispering my name. But I couldn't see a damn thing. Only the corner. It pulsed in my mind like a bruise under the skin. Even blind, I knew exactly where it was. The same damn spot. The same place Rusty barked at night after night. It felt open, wide, like a door had been left ajar. And something had finally stepped through. Then came the creaking. Slow, measured, floorboards straining under weight, but too deliberate to be ours. Too careful. It was walking, but not toward us. It was pacing, back and forth, across the living room, as if inspecting the place. No sound but that groaning wood beneath its steps. And every time it moved, Rusty barked, louder, more frantic, until he sounded like he was screaming through his throat. "Don't speak," Miriam whispered somewhere to my left. "Don't acknowledge it." But it didn't matter, because Max was humming a soft, broken tune, one I didn't recognize. He wasn't even aware he was doing it. His eyes were open, but unfocused, like he was watching something the rest of us couldn't see. "Max," I whispered. "Snap out of it, buddy." The creature stopped walking and turned toward us. I couldn't hear it move anymore, but I felt it. Rusty launched himself forward, barking like he was going to tear a hole in the wall. But his body froze midair, just like it had before. Hovering, twitching, then slamming down into the ground like something had grabbed him and thrown him aside. He yelped, didn't get up. Max's humming got louder. I turned to Miriam, my voice shaking. What the hell is it? She didn't answer. She was staring into the dark with wide, glassy eyes, sweat dripping down her temples. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then Kelly screamed, not just startled, a deep, primal scream, the kind a mother makes when something touches her child in the dark. I lunged toward the sound, hit a wall, or maybe the side of the couch, and stumbled forward until I found her. She was grabbing Max, pulling him away from the corner, whispering, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." Miriam chanted something under her breath. Then the lights came back on, but only in the hallway. The living room stayed dark, a thick, unnatural shadow hanging in the air like smoke that refused to rise. In the dim hallway light, I saw Rusty limping toward us, his body low, tail tucked. He looked defeated. Miriam stood up slowly. Her voice was ragged. "It's not just a spirit," she said. "It's something older, bound to the object you unearthed. Something that should have stayed buried." I looked at the box in my hands, still open, the lock of hair and shriveled bone inside. The black cloth had unfurled slightly, revealing a symbol drawn in faded ink. It looked like an eye, with teeth. "We have to destroy it," I said. Miriam shook her head. "You can't destroy an anchor without disrupting the bond. That might invite it in fully. We need to seal it, bind it again." "How?" "I need time," she said. "A circle, a barrier, something to hold it while I prepare the rite. But this thing, it knows now. It's awake." The lights flickered again. We didn't sleep that night. We pushed all the furniture into the hallway, locked ourselves in Max's room. Rusty lay curled beneath the bed, his body twitching in restless dreams. And outside the door, I swear I heard breathing. Not heavy, not fast. Just a slow, calm presence waiting on the other side of the wall. It never knocked, never spoke. It just waited. By morning, Miriam had drawn symbols in salt around the living room. She had burned herbs that filled the house with a thick, bitter smoke. She didn't explain much. Just said we had until sundown to finish the binding, or we'd have to leave. But I couldn't shake what Kelly had said when I found her clutching Max. It touched him. We took Max to the pediatrician just to be safe. Told them he had a fever. He didn't say a word the whole ride there. Just kept staring at the seat in front of him, humming that same low, eerie tune under his breath. The doctor said he was fine. No fever, no signs of trauma. But when she asked him what day it was, Max smiled and said, "The day the man in the corner learns to walk through walls." She looked at us like we were crazy. We left 5 minutes later. When we got back home, Miriam was in the middle of the ritual. She'd covered the corner with mirrors, 5 of them, angled inward, and laid the tin box in the center of a chalk circle. Candles burned low on each side, their flames barely flickering despite the air feeling thick and charged. "This thing," she said, "it was called here. Or maybe followed something." "You mean Rusty?" I asked. She glanced at the dog, who now lay outside the salt circle, his eyes fixed on the mirrors. "No, I think Rusty's bloodline saw it before, remembered it, but this..." She looked at Max. "He's the one it wants now." My stomach dropped. "It doesn't want to kill him. It wants to use him, become something new, a vessel. I lost it then. Grabbed the box, ready to throw it into the fireplace. If you destroy it, you set it free, Miriam shouted. I stopped. Behind me, every candle in the room extinguished at once. The mirrors cracked, not shattered, cracked, all at the same time. A spider web of lines forming across each reflective surface. Then Max walked into the room. We hadn't noticed him leave the hallway. He stepped into the circle, barefoot, smiling faintly. Rusty barked once, then whimpered. Max looked up at me and said, in a voice that was not his, "Now I remember where I buried it." Then he collapsed. The mirrors shattered completely. The box flung open, and a gust of wind from inside the house rushed past us so violently it knocked Miriam off her feet. The lights went out again, and from the darkness a voice whispered, "You brought me back. I just needed his name." Story 7. The corpses that won't stay still. I remember the first case like it was yesterday. Not because I saw it up close, but because of the way the town shifted. The quiet changed. The air grew heavier. Even the wind carried something else with it. Something I couldn't explain. Like it was warning us. Like it knew what was coming. I worked night shifts as a janitor at St. Clair Memorial Hospital, a rundown building on the edge of a dying town in northern Idaho. Population just over 7,000. Less if you count the ones who never leave their houses anymore. It's not glamorous work, but it keeps the lights on. Keeps my mind from wandering too far. The first whispers came from ER nurses on smoke breaks. A man had stumbled in around 3 a.m., coughing up blood and something thicker. Not just mucus, meat. Chunks of raw tissue that didn't belong in his lungs. He didn't have ID. Just a ratty denim jacket soaked in sweat and blood, and a paper bracelet around his wrist that read, "Patient Naziro in Shopee." That's what they started calling him. Patient Zero. I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd seen drug overdoses, frostbitten transients, even a guy who tried to cut off his own hand because he thought it had a demon inside. But this one was different. The nurses said he screamed that something was eating him alive from the inside. His skin had taken on a greenish hue, blistering and peeling like old paint left in the sun. They kept him in isolation 3A. But the next night, when I came in for my shift, 3A was empty, and the room smelled like something had died in it. Not a normal rot, but sweet, wet, and coppery. The kind of scent that clings to your nostrils, even hours later. I asked around, but no one had answers. Just silence, nervous glances. The kind you see when people want to speak, but can't. I started to notice small things. The bins filled with shredded uniforms, soaked bandages being disposed of without proper sealing. One of the young interns, Lydia, vomited in the hallway after changing linens. Said it wasn't the smell, but what was under the skin. I didn't press. By the third night, rumors spread faster than facts. That's always how it goes. I overheard someone say that patient Zero had bitten one of the nurses before disappearing. Another claimed he had rotted through the restraints and slipped out like a pile of wet clothes. I don't know which version was true. Maybe all of them. Maybe none. It wasn't until I saw the surveillance footage that the real terror settled in. It was just past 2 a.m., and I'd been told to clean the west corridor. The security guard, Theo, was half asleep at his desk, and I asked him to pull up 3A's camera feed, just out of curiosity. Maybe I was hoping for an answer. closure, but what I saw still wakes me up most nights. The footage was grainy, flickering between frames, but clear enough. Patient Zero sat up on the gurney, twitching. His head lolled to the side like it wasn't properly attached. Skin slid off his face when he moved, revealing blackened tendons that still twitched. Then he stood. His knees bent in the wrong direction. His gait was jerky, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. And then he looked directly at the camera. No sound, no words, just that wet, open-mouthed grin. A red line of drool ran down his chin, and he began to laugh, silently. But you could see the movement in his chest and shoulders. Theo quickly shut the monitor off, said he'd seen enough. That was when I started thinking about leaving town, but it was already too late. The following morning, the mayor's daughter collapsed at school, eyes bleeding, mouth locked in a scream that never ended. She didn't survive the ambulance ride. 2 EMTs who handled her were put on mandatory quarantine. A third went home and shot himself in the head that same night. By the end of the week, 14 cases had been reported. 12 died. The other 2 vanished before they could be contained. You'd think the government would step in, deploy the CDC, set up a perimeter. But that never happened. No roadblocks, no warnings, just silence. Like someone wanted it to spread. People began to act strange. Not just scared, paranoid. One neighbor started burning her clothes in the backyard every night. Another was found taping black garbage bags over every vent and window in her house. I asked her why. She whispered, "It travels in the humidity, in the flesh particles." Then she laughed. She hadn't slept in days. I should have left then. But I stayed. And that's how I ended up in the basement of Sinclair, on a shift I should have never taken. The night the lights went out. It started with flickering bulbs. One by one, each corridor dimmed. Then the backup generator failed. And then the screaming started. From the vents. I couldn't tell if it was human. There was something gurgling beneath the wails, like breath forced through collapsing lungs. I ran. Through hallways that seemed longer than they should be. Past rooms where bodies lay still on stretchers. But some moved. Just enough to make me question what I saw. Fingers twitching. Eyes fluttering open. When I wasn't looking directly at them, I reached the main lobby where Lydia stood frozen in front of the glass doors. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Blood poured from her ears. Then I saw them. Figures approaching from the parking lot, staggering, limbs hanging loose. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Burnt copper, mold, and meat left out in the sun. Then the way their bodies shifted, like something inside was trying to escape. One had no lower jaw, just a gaping throat full of black sludge. Another dragged intestines behind her like a wedding veil. Lydia turned to me, eyes wide and empty. "They're not dead," she said. "They never died." I grabbed her hand and ran. Back through the dark, deeper into the hospital. We locked ourselves in the supply closet behind the morgue. The cold storage hums just loud enough to muffle the distant footsteps and the wet smacking sounds. "We've been here for hours. They keep walking the halls. We can hear them breathing, if that's even what it is. I don't know what this virus is. I don't know where it came from. But I know it's not natural. And I know it's not over. Not even close." The closet was colder than I expected. The chill from the adjacent morgue seeped through the vents, curling around our feet like mist. Lydia sat against the metal shelving unit, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking slowly. Her face was pale, but her eyes, God, her eyes looked hollow, like she'd already seen what was coming. Every now and then, she whispered to herself. I couldn't make out the words. They weren't prayers. They were numbers. 12, 23, 31, backwards. 7, 7, 7. I didn't interrupt her. We'd been in there for maybe 4 hours. I lost track after the second. My watch had stopped ticking sometime around 3:13 a.m. The minute hand twitched now and then, but never moved forward. That bothered me more than it should have. It felt symbolic, like time had stopped for all of us, not just me. Outside, the footsteps had gone quiet, but that didn't bring comfort. It was the kind of quiet you know is temporary, a held breath before something screams. I tried my radio again, static, not even a broken voice or distress signal. Just dead air. Lydia broke the silence first. Her voice was hoarse, cracking with every syllable. You know what they told me before it all happened. I looked up. That this virus wasn't a virus. Not really. She didn't elaborate, I didn't ask, but I could feel it in the way she said it, that cold certainty behind her words. After a while, she stood up, legs trembling. We can't stay here. Why not? I asked, though I already knew. She hesitated. Because they remember. Where we hide. Where we were. I didn't believe her. Not at the time. But I followed her anyway. We slipped out into the hallway. The lights were back on faintly, flickering every few seconds like a dying campfire. Blood smeared across the floor tiles like drag marks. One of the gurneys was overturned. A single shoe sat in the middle of the corridor, still warm. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, go back. But Lydia kept walking, past the ER bay, past the nurse's station, toward the elevator shaft. You're going down there? I asked. The basement had flooded during last winter's storm. Everyone avoided it, even maintenance. Mold, rats, collapsing tiles, and something else according to the rumors. Something older. They took them down there, she muttered. The first ones, the ones who didn't die, but didn't live either. I didn't argue. Not with someone who had blood under her fingernails and numbers circling her tongue like a mantra. The elevator doors were jammed, so we pried open the stairwell instead. The descent was slow. Each step echoed, hollow and sharp. Halfway down, Lydia paused, turned around. You smell that? At first I didn't, but then it hit, sweet and sour rot, like fruit left in a sealed bag for weeks. It clung to my clothes, crawled into my nostrils. I covered my mouth with my sleeve. Lydia didn't. She just kept moving. At the bottom, the hallway was submerged ankle-deep in black water. Something floated toward us, bloated, unrecognizable. Maybe a cat. Maybe not. I didn't look too long. There were rooms down here I didn't know existed. Unmarked doors. No lights above them. Just faded red stains near the hinges and the sound of breathing from behind some of them. Not mechanical. Wet, strained, like someone forcing air through lungs filled with jelly. We found a file room, or what used to be one. Boxes melted into mush. Cabinets rusted through. Lydia knelt and pulled out a folder that hadn't completely dissolved. She wiped it off, flipped it open. The top page was stamped with a government seal. No hospital markings. Just the words. Project Sovereign, Phase 1. Neuropathogenic activation via cellular decay. Underneath, pictures, x-rays, photos of decayed spinal cords still reacting to electrical stimuli. Notes in shorthand. It didn't look like medical research. It looked like engineering. That's when I heard it again. The sound that haunted the vents. That breathing. Louder this time. Closer. I stepped back into the hallway and saw one. It stood hunched, back scraping the ceiling, head twitching in a circle as though it couldn't decide where to look. Its skin sagged like melted wax, one eye bulging and pulsing in its socket. It hadn't seen me yet. Or maybe it had, and just didn't care. It was chewing something. Then it dropped it. It was an arm, still wearing a hospital bracelet. I grabbed Lydia and ran. We didn't make it far before the thing shrieked. Not a scream, a frequency, high and sharp enough to make my vision blur. Lights burst above us. Water trembled. My nose bled instantly. We ducked into a records room and slammed the door shut. The thing banged against it once, twice, then stopped. And then silence again. Lydia collapsed, shaking. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My body was locked in that raw terror only prey animals must feel. She whispered to me in the dark. They're not creatures. I turned. They're vessels. The virus. It's not trying to kill the body. It's using it, growing through it, becoming. I asked what she meant. She hesitated. Have you heard the old story about parasites that hijack insects, make them do things against their will? Yeah, I said. Like the fungus in ants. She nodded slowly. That's what this is, but for us. That night we didn't sleep. When morning came, if you could call it that, we left the basement. The creature was gone, but something was different. The air was thicker, the hallways longer. Windows showed scenes that didn't make sense. Snow when it should have been rain. Mountains where there were none. A red sun, flickering like a dying bulb. Reality was breaking. This wasn't just an outbreak. It was an invasion. And we were already inside it. There's a point where fear stops being sharp. It dulls into something else. Something quieter, deeper. Like an ache in your bones you've learned to ignore because it's always there. That's where I was, mentally, when we stepped out of the basement of St. Clair. Lydia and I moved like ghosts through the empty corridors, past rooms with half-closed doors and beds that still held their occupants. Some were still. Others twitched in ways no living body should. One room had a patient who stared directly at us, unblinking, unmoving. Yet I could swear his lips curled upward when we passed. He hadn't been alive for days. The hospital above had changed. The walls had taken on a dampness, not from water, but from something else. Like they were sweating from the inside, paint blistered in long strips. Ceiling tiles sagged with hidden weight. It felt less like a building and more like something breathing. We're not supposed to be here anymore, Lydia whispered. I didn't ask what she meant. We found the emergency exit near the back, the one by the generator compound. It should have led out into the alley where the ambulances used to unload. I remember it vividly because I used to take smoke breaks there during the snow months. The wall had a long vertical gash in it from a delivery cart collision years back. But when I opened the door, there was no alley, just a hallway. Same tile, same flickering light, except the walls were wet, covered in something like black moss pulsing gently like it was alive. This isn't the hospital anymore, Lydia said. Her voice had no emotion, just exhaustion. It's copying it. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the truth of it broke something in me. I turned and slammed the door shut. Somewhere, Deep within the building, or whatever this place was now, an alarm began to sound. Low and slow, a siren groaning like a dying wail. Then came the overhead intercom, sputtering to life. Code black. Structural breach in origin sector. Transference phase initiated. Repeat, code black. Lydia didn't react. She just kept walking. I followed because there was nothing else left to do. We made our way toward the old pediatric wing. No one had used it in years. They shut it down after a mold outbreak, but now it looked pristine. The paint wasn't peeling. The tiles were clean. Bright murals of bears and cartoon suns covered the walls. And that was the worst part, because we hadn't reached it yet. We turned the corner, found ourselves there. Instantly, I looked back. We had just come from the ICU corridor, but the ICU was gone. "You feel that?" Lydia asked. The air had changed. Heavier, thicker, like walking through syrup. And then came the heat. Subtle at first, like standing next to an old radiator, then stronger. My skin began to prickle. Sweat gathered in the creases of my palms. We passed a glass room, labeled Pediatrics Ward B. Inside, a figure sat in a chair facing the window. Small. A child, maybe 7 or 8. I leaned closer to the glass. It was a girl. Her mouth was sewn shut, literal black thread through her lips. Her eyes were gone, sockets hollow and dripping. But she turned to look at me anyway. And then she mouthed something. I couldn't hear it. But Lydia stepped back sharply. She said your name. My blood ran cold. We didn't stay. We crossed the hallway and ducked into the nurse's break room, barricading the door with a vending machine. I slumped against the far wall and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Lydia sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. "We're inside it now," she murmured. I nodded. "You keep saying it. What is it, Lydia?" She looked at me, and for the first time since all this started, I saw real fear in her face. Not panic, not shock. Recognition. "I used to intern for a research facility just north of here," she began. "Private contract under a shell company. We weren't supposed to ask questions. Just run the scans, log the blood work. But something went wrong in one of the trials." She paused. "They were testing a regeneration serum. It was supposed to help tissues heal faster than anything else on the market, stem cell-based. But the test subjects started rejecting their own bodies." "Rejecting how?" "Like the body forgot what was supposed to be human, and it tried to rebuild itself. Wrong, new nerves, new skin, not natural. One of the researchers said it was like watching evolution in fast forward, but in the wrong direction. I felt sick. They buried the project, sealed the lab. But 2 weeks later, the first patient showed up in the ER. That guy with the peeling skin? He wasn't homeless. He was one of the techs who worked on it. Silence stretched between us, and then thud. From above us, the ceiling tiles rattled. Thud, thud, thud. Something was walking on the ceiling, something heavy. We didn't breathe. Dust trickled down in slow spirals. Then it stopped. We waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Until a single tile cracked, and a finger pushed through. Thin, bloated, rotten at the knuckles. It scratched gently against the tile, tapping with a rhythm. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. "Is that a Morse code?" I whispered. Lydia shook her head. "No, it's knocking." "Knocking?" She swallowed. "They don't break in. They wait to be let in." I stared at her. What the hell do you mean? She turned toward me, her voice barely audible. They're not hunting us like prey. They're waiting for us to surrender. And in that moment, I felt it. Something inside me. A warmth that wasn't mine. A tingle under the skin. Like 1,000 ants crawling through my veins. I stood up, panicked. Looked at my arm. There, just below the wrist, something moved. A twitch. A pulse. A small dark vein that wasn't there before. Spidering outward like ink in water. Lydia saw it too. Her face crumpled. No, she whispered, no. I looked at her, my voice cracking. What's happening to me? She didn't answer. But I already knew. I'd breathed it in. Touched the walls. Walked its halls. It had been inside me since the basement. The virus wasn't just flesh-eating. It was memory-consuming. It learned who we were. It used our identities to build itself. I wasn't just infected. I was becoming part of the structure. And I didn't know how much time I had left. Storch ate the bloodthirsty insects. I don't know how long I've been in here. At first I thought it was just a room. Square, dull, fluorescent lit with cheap white walls and a cold tile floor that smelled faintly of bleach and old water. But I was wrong. It's something else. Something alive. I woke up on the floor with a splitting headache and blood dried under my nose. No memory of how I got here. No windows. One steel door, locked, no handle on my side. Just a vent in the corner that hums low like it's breathing. The air smells off, like mold and rust mixed with something more organic, sour and rotting. I screamed until my throat gave out, pounded the door until my knuckles split. Nothing. No response. No voices. Just that damn vent humming like it's listening. The first sign of them came on the second day. At least, I think it was the second. Time is strange in this place. I hadn't eaten. My stomach gnawed at itself, and the silence was maddening. That's when I noticed the black dot near the baseboard, just under the metal cot bolted to the wall. At first, I thought it was a cockroach. I hate cockroaches. Always have. Something about the way they move, fast, skittering, like they know something you don't. But this one was wrong. Its legs were longer than they should have been, with tiny barbs at the joints. Its body had a wet sheen to it, and it moved in little jerks, like it was glitching. I tried to stomp it, but it vanished into the crack between the floor tiles. That night, I assume it was night, the lights never dim. I heard scratching, not loud, subtle, like nails on a chalkboard from far away. It came from the walls, then the vent, then under the bed. I didn't sleep. The next morning, there were more. 5, maybe 6. I counted. All identical. Same barbed legs, same glossy carapace. I watched them crawl along the seams in the wall like they owned the place. I kept to the center of the room, refusing to sit or lie down. And then came the humming. Not from the vent this time, from them. Like tiny little motors clicking in unison. It wasn't loud, but I felt it in my teeth, like the sound burrowed inside my bones. They were communicating. I know how that sounds, but I swear they were talking to each other, plotting. By the 4th day, I had to mark time with scratches on the wall, using a piece of metal I broke from the cot. They doubled in number. Some were bigger now, fatter. Their abdomens pulsed like they were breathing. And their eyes, God, their eyes. I didn't notice them at first, but they had these tiny iridescent spots. Deep green, glowing faintly under the flickering ceiling light. One of them climbed onto my arm while I slept. I woke up screaming, flinging it off, but it had bitten me. Just a small red dot, but I felt sick afterward. Dizzy, feverish. I don't think it was venom. I think it was something else. I tore apart the cot that day, fashioned a crude bat out of one of the legs. It made me feel better, like I had some control. But every time I swung at them, they scattered before the metal even touched them, like they could predict my movement. Then the door clicked. It didn't open. It just clicked. A loud mechanical sound like a deadbolt shifting. I rushed to it, screaming for help, pounding and shouting until my fists bled again. Then I noticed the room had changed, subtle at first. The light flickered more often, and there was a buzzing sound now, like static crawling under my skin. The walls looked darker, stained in the corners. I thought I was imagining things, hallucinating, but I wasn't. Later that day, later that time, the wall across from me bulged. Just slightly, like something behind it was pressing outward. I stared at it for what felt like hours. Nothing happened. Then I blinked, and it was gone. They came in waves after that. The insects, hundreds, crawling through the vent in a coordinated swarm. They didn't scatter anymore. They surrounded me. I stood on the bed, swinging my metal rod wildly, yelling like a madman. They didn't attack, not yet. They just circled, watching. That's when I realized they were studying me. I saw something in their movements, something intelligent. They moved in patterns. They avoided the corners where I spilled water from the sink. They only came out after I stopped pacing. They waited for me to sit, to lower my guard. I felt like a lab rat in a cage designed by something that didn't just want to kill me, but understand me first. I tried to block the vent, shoved the mattress against it, but they chewed through it. No, not chewed, melted through it, like acid from their mouths. I saw the foam bubbling as they came through, quiet and calm, like they knew there was no point in rushing. I slept maybe an hour that night, woke up to one crawling on my lips. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I stayed still, barely breathing. It sat there for a moment, its legs twitching, its body pulsing. And then it crawled off me and vanished into the floor crack again. It was testing me. I think they're preparing me for something. Because last night, the wall bulged again. But this time, it didn't stop. A long vertical crack appeared, oozing some dark liquid that smelled like rotting meat. The room temperature dropped. I saw my breath in the air. And from that crack, I heard something. Not a voice exactly. More like a whisper. A memory of a scream. It said my name. It knew my name. That's when I understood. This wasn't about bugs. Not really. This room isn't just a trap. It's a cocoon. And I'm changing. They're making me into something. Something that's not human. And I don't think I'll ever leave this place the way I came in. If I ever leave at all. I stopped marking time on the wall. It didn't matter anymore. The insects had taken over the floor, every inch of it. I slept on the cot, curled in fetal position, gripping the rusted rod like a lifeline. I don't think they sleep. I can hear them constantly, skittering, whispering across the tiles, climbing the walls and dropping from the ceiling like rain. At first they stayed in the corners. Now they gather in the center, unmoving, waiting. The bite on my arm turned black around the edges. Veins around it are thick and dark, like tree roots under pale skin. Sometimes it pulses. It doesn't hurt, but I can feel it doing something, changing me. I wake up with new dreams now, strange, crawling thoughts that aren't mine. And sometimes I hear them whispering inside my head. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when the door opened. It didn't swing open like a normal door. It peeled back, metal folding in on itself like paper soaked in acid, and behind it wasn't a hallway. It was a corridor of flesh, walls that throbbed and breathed. The floor beneath the threshold squished when I stepped on it, warm and slick. I should have stayed put, but the air in the room had grown thick, heavy. Breathing felt like swallowing wet cotton. The insects had surrounded the cot, pressing in closer with each passing hour, no longer hiding their hunger. So I ran, through the doorway, into the thing that shouldn't exist. The hallway pulsed with a heartbeat I could feel in my shoes. Red light leaked from somewhere above, but there were no bulbs, just veins. I passed openings on either side, rooms like mine, with doors fused shut or ripped open. Inside each one was a scene worse than the last. One room had blood on every surface, splashed across the ceiling in abstract shapes. Another had a man, or what was left of one, suspended from the ceiling by hundreds of fine strands, like spider silk made of muscle fiber. His chest moved. He was alive, barely. The next room held a mirror, just a single spotless mirror in the center. But when I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw one of them. I staggered back, nearly tripping over the pulsing floor. My breath caught in my throat. When I looked again, my reflection had returned, but its mouth was moving. I wasn't speaking. I didn't wait to find out more. I ran. The hallway narrowed ahead. The walls pressed in close. The deeper I went, the more the sound changed. The skittering of insects grew louder, higher pitched, more urgent. The walls began to twitch as I passed, like they were reacting to me, watching me. Then I reached the feeding room. I knew it was a feeding room the moment I saw it. Not because of bones or corpses, but because of the smell. The thick, sour stench of rot and meat left too long in the sun. It was a vast, circular chamber. The walls were alive, moving, covered in a mass of insect-like creatures, packed together so tightly their bodies writhed as one. In the center was a chair. Strapped to it was a woman. She looked half dead, eyes sunken, lips cracked, skin stretched thin across her bones. Tubes ran from her arms into the walls. Her head twitched toward me. "You're late," she croaked. I didn't know what to say. My voice caught in my throat. She smiled, and her teeth were black. "They like you," she said. "They've been watching you longer than you think." I took a step back. "They feed on fear, on thought, on memory," she said. "But they need new hosts, better ones. You're changing, aren't you? You feel it." I looked down at my arm. The blackened bite had split open. Something thin and white moved inside it, like a lava. I wanted to scream, but the insects on the walls began to buzz. Loud, like 1,000 locusts chewing in unison. My ears rang. My vision blurred. "They'll take your body," she said, her voice rising over the noise. "But first they take your mind. They strip you down until you're hollow. Then they fill you." The light overhead changed, flashing red, then white, then red again. The insects began to pour from the walls. Not crawling, flying, tiny wings slicing the air, swarming toward me in a wall of black chitin. I turned and ran, back through the corridor. I didn't look back. I don't remember how I made it back to the room. The door was open when I got there, as if it had been waiting. The insects didn't follow me inside. Instead, they sealed the door behind me. And now I sit here. The bite on my arm is worse. The blackness has spread to my shoulder. I hear a voice when I close my eyes, soft, persuasive, whispering in words that sound like my own thoughts but aren't. I don't think I'm alone anymore. Something is inside me, watching, waiting, growing. And the worst part, I don't want it to stop. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I didn't. Maybe the part of me that used to sleep, the human part, is already gone. When I opened my eyes, the room was different again. The walls weren't flat anymore. They shimmered as though covered in a thin membrane that twitched when I breathed. The lights no longer flickered. Instead, they pulsed softly, in rhythm with my heartbeat. Or maybe the room's heartbeat. At this point, I wasn't sure which was which. The insects had vanished. Not a single one crawled along the floor or circled the ceiling. The silence was worse than the buzzing. Something was about to happen. I felt it in my blood, or what was left of it. I looked at my arm. The skin had split open sometime during the night, peeling back like cracked bark. Beneath it, fibrous strands wriggled gently, luminous and slick. They weren't veins, they weren't tendons. They were alive, moving with intent, pulsing in time, with a rhythm that didn't belong to me. And then the voice came again. It didn't come from outside. It came from inside, from just beneath the surface of my mind, like a tick buried in the folds of my thoughts. We are learning you. The voice wasn't male or female. It was insectoid in tone, dry, sharp, and segmented. But it used my own inner monologue, twisting my thoughts until I could no longer tell what was mine. You're a good shell, curious, adaptive, stronger than the others. I tried to speak, to scream, but my voice was gone. Only a rasp came out, dry and cracked, like dead leaves. My body didn't move like it used to. My joints bent slightly too far. My fingers tingled constantly, and I could feel them, the colony, working beneath my skin, nesting, thriving. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt peace. Not calm, not comfort, something deeper. Like the feeling you get when you finally understand a horrible truth you've avoided your whole life. That I was never getting out of here. And worse, that I didn't want to. Then the wall opened. Not the door. The wall. It peeled back in sections like petals unfurling. Beyond it wasn't another hallway of flesh, but something far more terrifying. A memory. It was my childhood bedroom. Exactly as I remembered it. Poster of space on the wall. The wooden dresser with a drawer that never shut properly. And the blue and grey comforter I cried into the night my dog died. Even the smell was right. Dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet, cereal maybe. I stepped inside, barefoot. The floor was warm, too warm. There were no insects here, but I didn't trust it. I moved slowly, scanning every surface. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. I sat on the bed. And then he walked in, my father. He'd been dead for over a decade, cancer. But there he was, alive, breathing, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Hey, bud," he said, his voice soft, exactly as I remembered. "Rough day?" I couldn't respond. My throat burned. He sat next to me, placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt real, warm, steady. "You're doing great," he said, better than they expected. I turned to face him, and his eyes, at first familiar, shifted. Too many pupils, too much shine. They were watching me through his face. "What are you doing to me?" I whispered. "You already know," he said, You're becoming the bridge, the connection. You're going to bring them through. No, I choked. I didn't agree to anything. You didn't have to, he replied, smiling wider. You were chosen. You made yourself open. Your loneliness, your desperation, your emptiness, they filled it. Behind him, the room started to dissolve. The posters peeled off like dead skin. The ceiling blackened with writhing shapes. I heard them again. The hum of wings, the chittering of teeth too small to see. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was back in the room. But now the ceiling was gone. Above me was a void, an impossible sky filled with shifting shadows. Giant insectoid limbs crawled just beyond the veil of darkness. Some brushed the edges of the room, as if testing its boundaries. I stood and saw that the floor was changing too, softer, passing gently beneath my feet like the inside of a womb. I was inside them now, part of the hive. I began to feel things I couldn't explain, thoughts that didn't belong to me, memories of lives I had never lived. A desert colony where the ground moved, a village that disappeared overnight, a scientist screaming in an underground lab as his skin erupted with crawling things. Every victim, every transformation, every birth, they showed it to me. You will help them be born, the voice said. You are the womb of understanding, the translator of hunger, the echo of what was once human. I wanted to die. I tried to dig into my arm with my fingers, to rip the colony out, but my nails broke. My skin would not dare. The fibers beneath it pulsed harder. They wouldn't let me go. Suddenly, I heard something new. A voice, not inside my head, but real, echoing faintly through the wall behind the cot. Is someone there? Hello? A woman's voice. Alive, human. My heart lurched. I fell to my knees, pressing my ear to the wall. Hello? Who are you? No response, just a soft sob. Then, they said you were the last one, that it would be over, but you're still here. Where are you? I asked, my voice shaking. I'm in the next cell. I've been watching them through the cracks. They feed on us until we change. I tried to kill myself, but it wouldn't let me. What are they? I whispered. They're not from here, she said. Not space, not hell, somewhere between. And you, they made you the gatekeeper. You're the final threshold. I don't understand. You will, she said. When the wings open, when the sky bleeds. Then the wall cracked. Something began pushing through from her side. A finger? No. A leg, thin, barbed, covered in slime. I backed away as the wall split open like a wound, revealing a single, massive eye. Compound, multicolored, reflecting 1,000 tiny versions of me. I screamed, and the room screamed back. I didn't think a single eye could hold so much meaning. But that thing, glistening, faceted, large enough to fill the cracked wall between my room and the woman's voice, stared into me like it had always known who I was. Not just my face, my core, my sins, my failures, my most desperate moments. Every time I'd cried alone, every time I'd prayed to something I didn't believe in, every time I'd screamed into a silent void, begging to feel something, it knew them. It remembered them better than I did. And now it was inside the room. The wall split further, with a long, wet sound, like skin tearing open under a blunt knife. The creature began pushing through. Its body didn't follow the rules of anatomy. It folded, bled, expanded, and shimmered all at once, constantly changing, never fully solid. Limbs erupted from its sides and retracted again. Mouths appeared on its back, chattering silently before melting away. Behind it, behind her, the woman whose voice I heard, there was only a gaping hole. No cell, no room, just blackness stretching out in all directions, like she had never existed. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe they'd invented her too. Just another illusion to push me along. The insect creature slid halfway into my space, pressing one glistening leg against the floor as it turned its side toward the ceiling, then toward me. I couldn't move. Not out of fear, though God knows I felt that, but because something inside me locked up. The muscles in my legs refused to answer. My breath came in short, panicked gasps like the air had thickened into molasses. Then the voice returned. The voice. The one that crawled beneath thought. Do not resist the emergence. You are the cocoon. The others failed. You were always meant to become. I shook my head, jaw trembling. No, I'm not like them. You are better. You survived. The insect's eye pulsed. I felt it, not in my head, but in the pit of my stomach, in the meat of my spine, in the marrow of my teeth. Like something ancient was calling from below my bones. I tried to scream again, but my throat no longer worked like it used to. My vocal cords twisted into something else, something brittle and wet. What came out was a shriek, high-pitched, multi-toned, not human. I fell to my knees. That's when the ground opened beneath me. Not cracked, opened, like lips parting around a secret. I dropped straight down, swallowed by the room, the tile folding in on itself and vanishing above me like it had never existed. And then I was falling, not through space, but through memory. I saw flashes. My old apartment, shattered glass, and dishes on the floor. My mother's face in a hospital bed. Her mouth slack, staring at me, but not recognizing my name. My reflection in the bathroom mirror last year, whispering to myself that I was nothing. Then came their memories, the hives, a jungle somewhere nameless, overrun in a single night. A subway car, its windows slicked with red, filled with crawling shadows. A man in a suit, scratching holes into his own skin, laughing as something whispered through his teeth. They weren't just feeding on people. They were feeding on meaning. On identity, they wore us like clothes, puppeted us until we broke. And now, I was next. I landed hard on something that wasn't quite round. Soft, spongy, breathing. When I stood, I found myself in a cavern the size of a stadium. The walls were made of ribbed tissue, glowing faintly from within, pulsing like lungs. All around me, embedded in the walls, were others. Human shapes, hundreds of them. Their faces twisted mid-scream, eyes stretched open, hands fused into the pulsing flesh. Some were half-melted, others completely still, just outlines beneath the skin. But some were awake. One turned to look at me. His jaw moved, but no sound came out. And I saw it then. His eyes were black, no pupils, no irises, just solid voids swirling with something that looked like stars collapsing. Then I felt them behind me again. The insects, thousands of them. A wave of black limbs and wings and clicking mouths surged forward from the tunnel behind me, climbing the walls, crawling over each other, circling around the half-living bodies embedded in the walls like ants over a corpse. And at the center of it all was her. Not the woman from earlier, not quite. This one had her face, but stretched longer, darker, smoother. Insect mandibles clicked where her mouth used to be, and long black tendrils flowed from her spine into the walls. She was part of the hive, or maybe its queen, She looked at me and spoke, not aloud, but through my bones. You are the final seed. You will burst, and we will pour into your world. My stomach twisted. Something inside me shifted. I looked down. My abdomen moved, bulged. Something inside was moving. I screamed again, but this time I didn't recognize my own voice. And then I understood. This was the end of me. Not death, transformation, but somewhere, deep inside the noise, the horror, the shifting tide of insect thought, was a flicker. A sliver of me, a memory, a voice, not theirs, mine. You're not finished yet. I grabbed the metal shard still tied to my belt, a relic from my cell. I hadn't even realized I still had it. The thing inside me shrieked. I drove it into my side, once, twice, a third time. A rush of black fluid burst out, hot, steaming, burning through my skin like acid. The insects screamed in unison. The queen screeched and reared back, hundreds of eyes narrowing into slits. I dropped to my knees. My body was breaking, but my mind, for a moment, was clear. If I was the gateway, maybe I could be the lock too. Maybe I could seal this thing from the inside. I crawled toward the nearest wall, toward the embedded humans, their eyes blank, their souls long consumed. I pressed my hand to the wall and whispered something I hadn't said in years. My name is Thomas. I am not yours. The wall recoiled. The insects froze, and something snapped. A deafening shriek ripped through the cavern. Light erupted from the ceiling, white, searing, unnatural. The queen howled. The swarm scattered, and then everything turned to ash.